A very good afternoon to all of you. I, Dr. Gopal Parthasarthi Sharma, on behalf of Jammu Kashmir Unity Foundation, welcome you all to this auditorium of India International Center. Today, we have gathered here for observing a day that is 76th Holocaust Remembrance Day. We are here to pray for all those souls, millions of people who lost their lives in unimaginable, most gruesome, cruel violence that they were subjected to 76 years back or even more. So this day is observed throughout the world. Although we are new to this, reason being, we believed that whatever happened thousands of miles away from this place, how are we concerned with that? But Jammu Kashmir Unity Foundation last year decided to observe this day, not because we were directly related to the people who lost their lives, but because wherever some human being is subjected to such violence, each and every human being must respond to it, must understand it. So in that way, this is very relevant to all of us. More so, the basic aim is to make world community understand that Holocaust is not limited to a geographical area. It is not limited to a time span. It is something that happened before 1940s, centuries and centuries back. And it has happened even after that. And it is still happening. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to talk about this issue. We have a distinguished panel to discuss this thing. And due to COVID-19 and yesterday whatever happened, we were expecting a better gathering, but still quality is there, quantity does not matter. And in the virtual world where we are living, I think this thing will reach out to many people, many more people than those sitting here in this auditorium. So, to proceed further, first let me request all the panelists to kindly take their seats on the stage. Thank you, all of you. Now I request Mr. Amit Gupta to please come on the stage and felicitate Mr. Nitin Gokhale with an Angvastram. And this Angvastram has been made from special pashmina from the hilly regions of Basoli in Jammu and Kashmir. Please, Mr. Amit Gupta. Now I request Mrs. Ritu Singh to present an Angvastram to Madam Sandhya Jain. Thank you. Now I request Mr. Ajaat Jamwal, President Jammu Kashmir Unity Foundation, to felicitate Francois Gautier with the Angvastram. Thank you. Now I request Mrs. Neena to please present an Angavastram to Dr. Nuzhat Chaudhary. Thank you. Now I request Mr. Arunesh Shan to present an Angavastram to Dr. Ajay Chrungoo, Chairman, Panun Kashmir. Now I request Mr. Ajaat Jamwal again to present Angavastram to Dr. Bashir. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest here, Ms. Alina Bistiu from Embassy of Romania. Now I request Mr. Ajaat Jamwal to present one Angavastram to her. Thank you. Now may I request all the distinguished guests on the stage to proceed for lamp lighting, a tradition that we are following for eternity. Please. So now we will begin with our first speaker. And first speaker for today is Mr. Nitin Anant Gokhale. He's an author and editor-in-chief of Strat News Global. I request Mr. Nitin Anant Gokhale to please share his views on today's topic. Mr. Nitin Gokhale, please.
My co-panelists, distinguished guests here, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a rare privilege to come and speak about some of the painful incidents that have happened not across the world but in the subcontinent and especially in the Indian subcontinent over the past 50, 60 years. And when Ajaat came to me with a request, I was surprised because I'm neither been part of a victim community or someone who's seen it up close. But because I've authored and I've studied the genocide in East Pakistan, now of course Bangladesh, I think he was interested in hearing my views or at least share some of the findings that are well known, but sometimes they need a recap as far as events are concerned, because almost 50 years, exactly 50 years have passed. Next 2 months later, it will be 50 years of that genocide that began actually on 25th of March 1971 in East Pakistan, in Dhaka, and then spread to the countryside, what was then East Pakistan, later became Bangladesh. So I will be, of course, brief, and some of it may seem a little repetitive to many of you, those who have studied history, those who have read about what happened exactly half a century ago when Bangladesh was created. But it's always important to recap those events, because it doesn't take much to have a repeat of such incidents as we have seen in history. I mean, if Holocaust happened, and this is a Holocaust Remembrance Day. Holocaust happened between 1941 and 1945 against the Jews in Europe. The figures are anywhere between the number of Jews killed in Europe that time by Nazi Germany was put at between 6 million to 7 million European Jews, and maybe a little more after that across Europe. And that's why it's called Holocaust. It's another name for genocide. And genocide, as all of you know, is defined as a targeted killing of a ethnic group or a community or a religious group in order to exterminate that ethnic group or that religious group. And what happened exactly half a century ago in East Pakistan was nothing but genocide. And if you look at why it happened, what are the reasons for it, we have to go back to India's partition. In 1947, when India was divided into Pakistan and India, and of course East Pakistan and West Pakistan, there was, it's an indisputable fact that partition was based on religion. But the two parts of Pakistan may have had common religion, but they had no cultural compatibility. The Bengalis were Bengalis first, then they were Muslims. At least in those years, they believed that they were Bengalis first and then they were Muslims. Islam was a religion for them which was not so important as was their culture, their language, their music, their literature. And therefore, it was an artificial construct when Pakistan was created, East and West Pakistan. They had nothing in common. They had absolutely nothing in common except religion. And that too, the way religion was practiced in the two parts of Pakistan that time was also different. So when this country got created, there was already obviously a lot of differences between the way people viewed religion, people lived their life or looked at themselves. And of course, there was another anomaly in the entire construct of Pakistan as a nation state in 1947. And that was all the political power was concentrated in West Pakistan, dominated by the Punjabis, Pakistani Punjabis, and who treated the East Pakistanis or the Bengalis living in East Pakistan in a stepmotherly fashion. They discriminated against them. They did not give them equal opportunities. Very early, even when Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was still alive, he imposed Urdu as the national language on East Pakistan or the entire Pakistan nation state and refused to make Bengali the second national language. Now, that actually was the beginning of the rift between East and West Pakistan, apart from many other factors like denial of jobs, denial of equal opportunities, and what have you. So, and this despite the fact that the Bengalis were a majority. If you took Pakistan as one nation, the Bengalis numbered 75 million. There were 75 million Bengalis and 55 million West Pakistanis. So there were 20 million more Bengalis in the nation, the Pakistani nation. And yet, the power was concentrated in what can be called as the lesser number of people in West Pakistan. It was loaded in favor of West Pakistanis. The Punjabis dominated, as we say, everything from the army to bureaucracy to judiciary to business. And government power was concentrated in the hands of those who were living in West Pakistan. So this became, of course, the beginning of the rift, and it kept on widening because of the differential in living standards, differential in per capita income of both the wings of Pakistan. So there was another anomaly which West Pakistan could not live with. In East Pakistan, and now Bangladesh, there was considerably large group of minorities within East Pakistan, Christians, Buddhists, and Hindus. In 1941 census, the Hindus were about 21% of the East Pakistan province. Now it has come down to about 9%, subsequently because of several reasons, not only the genocide in 71, but subsequent attacks on the Hindus when the BNP government was in power in the late 90s, mid-90s and late 90s, post Bangladesh's independence. So that was also an anomaly which the West Pakistanis could not live with. They had Hindu population in large number compared to West Pakistan In East Pakistan, they had Buddhist, as we know, the Chakmas and the Shanti the people living in Chittagong hill tracts, and of course Christians lived in large numbers in East Pakistan. The beginning of the end of West Pakistani domination in the minds of East Pakistanis actually began in the 1965 war. And I'm deliberately taking you through the various stages of discrimination that happened against East Pakistanis. In 1965 war, when the East Pakistan province asked for security against India, mind you, because it was still under the Pakistani nation state, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was then the foreign minister, and Ayub Khan, who was the martial law administrator and president of Pakistan in 1965, both of these people initiated the 1965 war. I do not need to give history lessons to this audience. That time when the East Pakistanis, especially the Awami League leaders, when they asked for protection against possible Indian aggression in East, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and Ayub Khan dismissed their fears, saying they can take care of themselves, they don't need to be defended. That started suspicion in the minds of the political leadership of Awami League, which was the dominant party in East Pakistan, and under Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And from there on, the seeds of separatism, if I can call that, it really wasn't separatism. They wanted autonomy, or they wanted equal share of political power, at least in those years, 1965, 1966. They kept on agitating, they kept on demanding more autonomy. The last straw, and this is the last point about the run-up to the genocide, the last straw, as it were, was the cyclone Bhola in November 1970, where more than 1 million Bengalis perished in the cyclone. As you know, even today, Bangladesh is faced with natural calamities, especially cyclones, because it falls in the path of the devastating cyclones that come in the Bay of Bengal. And during Cyclone Bhola, so many Bengalis were killed. But that people were willing to accept as a natural calamity. What the Bengalis were not willing to accept was the slow response of the Pakistani government headquartered in Rawalpindi and Islamabad. And that really turned the tide. So when within a month there was a general elections held for the Pakistan National Assembly in December 1970, the Awami League swept the elections. They gained majority. They were clearly number one party, more than the single largest party. And PPP, the Pakistani People's Party led by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, were left way behind at number 2. Now that became a big dilemma for the West Pakistani rulers. Yahya Khan, who had replaced Ayub Khan as the field marshal, as the martial law administrator and president, and Bhutto could not digest the fact that there was every possibility that Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, a Bengali, leading the Awami League, could become the Prime Minister of Pakistan, theoretically, because his party had the single largest, his party was the single largest party at that point in time. Now, all the maneuverings began. The Pakistani army did not want a Bengali to lead the Pakistani nation state. Bhutto, of course, was very wily, very crafty. He colluded with Yahya Khan, and they denied Awami League for the next 3 months, 2.5 months, any legitimate share of power or even any legitimate permission to take over the administration of Pakistan. Now on 1st March, after 2 months of negotiations, 1st March 1971, the National Assembly was suspended because the West Pakistanis did not want the East Bengali or the Bengalis to become all-powerful politically. The moment that Pakistan National Assembly was suspended and the civil disobedience movement began in East Pakistan, the law and order broke down in that part of Pakistan, now Bangladesh. And then the Pakistani army, egged on by Bhutto, who wanted to be Prime Minister at any cost, devised what is now well known as Operation Searchlight, which actually the planning was done in the first week of March 1971. Sahibzada Yaqub Khan and the earlier governor, I forget his name, Hassan, they did not want to be part of that conspiracy, the crackdown which was planned. So Tikka Khan was brought in, and he unleashed what is now very well known as Operation Searchlight. So on the night of 25th March 1971, Pakistani Army's Operation Searchlight began with a raid on the Dhaka University. The Iqbal Hall, which was well known as the hub of intellectual churning, intellectual discussions. All the professors and students and radicals we used to gather there. So they were gathered there, or they were brought in there, and at midnight on 25th March 1971, nearly 40 of those intellectuals were murdered. That was a murder, pure and simple murder by the Pakistani army. And that was the starting point of the genocide in 1971. At that night, in the next 12 hours, nearly 7,000 people were killed in the span of 12 hours in Dhaka itself. The targets were, of course, the intellectuals, the professors, some of the Awami League leaders, second and third tier Awami League leaders. And in the old Dhaka city, prominent Hindu families who were money bags, who were wealthy people, they were targeted, and 7,000 of them were killed on the first night itself. That was the beginning of the genocide in East Pakistan. Then, of course, Sheikh Mujib was arrested and flown to Rawalpindi on the morning of 26th of March. So even today, 26th of March is observed as the day when the downslide of the Pakistani power began in East Pakistan. Now, of course, it's Bangladesh, and Bangladeshis observe it with a lot of care and reverence, because that is seen as the starting point of the freedom struggle of the Bengalis from the dominance of the West Pakistanis. Now, as I said, 7,000 people were killed on the first night, but this genocide continued over the next 4 months. Step by step, the Pakistani army targeted first the dissenters, the Awami League sympathizers, supporters. Then they went against the Ahmadiyas. They went against the Hindus in large number, in small pockets outside Dhaka, then smaller towns, Khulna, then Chittagong, Maimansingh. Many of those places they went around looking for the Hindus and massacring them. And the numbers that have been put out by historians and those who reported from there is put at about 200,000, 2 lakh, between 2 to 3 lakh people were killed in those 4 months by the Pakistani army, directly murdered by the Pakistani army. 2 lakh women were raped as a targeted rape, as a targeted attempt to subdue the Bengalis for their resistance. What the West Pakistanis did not expect was the large-scale resistance that happened first spontaneously, later in an organized manner through Mukti Bahini and through the Mukti Jodhas, as they call it in Bengal. And this went on for 5 to 6 months until, of course, the Indian intervention, the military intervention that happened on 3rd of December onwards in 1971. Tikka Khan rightfully has been described, has been given the name as Butcher of Bengal, because he was the one who presided over the genocide. It is the largest genocide post-World War II. Probably even Rwanda later in the 90s does not come close to what happened in East Pakistan that time. And of course, the story would not have come out had it not been for some intrepid journalists who were part of the foreign press corps in Dhaka. Incidentally, when Tikka Khan unleashed Operation Searchlight, he had imprisoned and then expelled 200 foreign journalists from Dhaka before Operation Searchlight began on 25th March, midnight of 25th March 1971. One journalist, Simon Dring, of then with the Daily Telegraph of London, hid himself in the hotel that all these journalists were rounded up for 2 nights. He managed to escape the attention of the people, and he came up with a report initially on 30th of March 1971, giving the first report, first glimpse of the horrific attack and the pillage and the loot and the rape and the killing that had happened in that week between 23rd to 30th March. That was the first peep into the Holocaust, the genocide, whatever you want to call it. You give different names, but the fact was that so many people were being killed. Targeted killing was carried out by the Pakistani army in those months. First the weeks and then months. But the biggest impact of the genocide coming to the world's notice and the world sitting up and taking notice of what had happened in East Pakistan actually came through an insider. Now, that's a very interesting story. Many of you would have heard of this name, Anthony Mascarenhas, who was a West Pakistan-based journalist based in Karachi of Goan descent. He was from Goa originally, but had gone and settled down in Karachi. And he was part of a conducted tour of the Pakistani army to East Pakistan, who wanted to show off what they had done to the East Pakistanis, the targeted operation, as they called it, to try and straighten out the Bengali mind or straighten out the Bengalis. So a group of West Pakistan-based journalists were taken on a conducted tour of the Bengal or the East Pakistan countryside. And of course, all of them came and wrote glowing pieces. Most of them, a majority of them, wrote glowing pieces about the Pakistani army's systematic operation in East Pakistan. But Anthony Mascarenhas couldn't get over the fact that what he was witnessing, what he was made to witness, was nothing but genocide, nothing but targeted killing, nothing but crime against humanity. So he wanted to bring this to the notice of the world. But he had one problem. His family was in Pakistan and he did not want them to be targeted by the Pakistani authorities. And in those years, he has written it himself, that those years, Pakistanis, maybe even Indians that time, couldn't go abroad more than twice a year. So he had already been abroad twice a year, so he couldn't have gone. So he sent out his family, and then he escaped via Afghanistan and Turkey to Europe, and went and met the editor of London Times, Harold Evans, gave him the entire story, who of course cross-checked and believed him. And on 13 June 1971, London Times carried a banner headline, eight columns in its pages, just with single word, genocide. That report was the turning point in history of East Pakistan and history of genocide. The world came to know about the genocide through Anthony Mascarenhas, and I'll read out only one small paragraph, what Anthony Mascarenhas wrote in his report entitled Genocide, which was published on 13 June edition of London Times. And I quote, "I saw Hindus hunted from village to village and door to door, shot offhand after a cursory short arm inspection showed they were uncircumcised. I have heard the screams of men bludgeoned to death in the compound of the circuit house in Comilla. I have seen truckloads of other human targets and those who had the humanity to try to help them hauled off for disposal under the cover of darkness and curfew." This is just one paragraph which describes the horrific incidents and happenings that were taking place in East Pakistan at that point in time. That opened the floodgates. The world community took notice. Superpowers came into play. India, of course, was facing huge inflow of refugees. Initially, a mixed population of Muslims and Hindus, but at the end of it, mostly Hindus towards the end from June onwards, mostly Hindus living in East Pakistan were forced to flee East Pakistan and come into Tripura, Bengal, Assam of that point in time. And the rest is history. India was burdened with the refugees, even when India was a poor country. at that point in time, 50 years ago, and which forced India's hand, Indira Gandhi's hand, and then of course all of you know what happened. So the point of recapping all this is, and talking about the genocide is, that genocide can happen with hubris, with arrogance of power. Genocide can happen because a majority community or those who hold power do not want to share power with those who do not have power, but they have legitimately won political power, and then this happens. So that is an example in East Pakistan, which actually gives us a glimpse into what human mind can do and what human mind can think of. While there is compassion, there is sympathy, there is empathy, largely amongst us in humans, there is also the inhuman tendency of killing other human beings, targeting them because of their religion, targeting them because of their nationality, because of their belief. And this tendency doesn't go away if we don't, I mean, it has not sort of come up so much. But if we are not eternally vigilant about this, this tendency is likely to come back again if we don't keep a watch and have a watchful community of people who will look at this as a crime against humanity. Not too many people have been punished for this. Neither Tikka Khan, nor Yahya Khan, nor Bhutto, or those who were perpetrating the atrocities in East Pakistan have been punished. Although Pakistan as a nation was humiliated, it was dismembered, another partition of Pakistan took place, but that's a small price to pay, I would say, because the individuals who perpetrated that were not brought to book. Maybe there's a lesson there that those who were responsible for that genocide should have been actually punished publicly and maybe given appropriate punishment. That probably hasn't happened, and that's something that we should look ahead. When we look ahead and try and prevent such genocides, that should be a lesson, that those who perpetrate such inhuman acts must get punished and must get their due comeuppance. I think that's something that we should carry as a takeaway from there. I'll stop here. There are other eminent speakers who will be speaking about various other examples and various other incidents in the history of subcontinent and the world. But I must thank Ajaat Jamwal and his team of organizers for giving me this opportunity. I would love to have stayed on, but there is a medical emergency at home. I actually should have gone out of Delhi yesterday, but since I had committed to be here, I said I'll come and speak and then take leave because I have to rush back again. But thank you very much for this opportunity once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nitin Gokhale. It was really enlightening, and you really spoke about certain details that are basically a matter of shame for the humanity. And I think if the world community does not understand, does not extend the definition of genocide, does not extend the definition of Holocaust to include all such genocides that happened in our part of the world, I think that will be a major mistake. Anyway, now I invite Ms. Sandhya Jain, an eminent speaker, author, and journalist. And ma'am, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think that after hearing a brilliant expose from Nitinji, I realize that all the conversation we're going to have today is about genocidal incidents in our part of the subcontinent. I have been invited to speak on Balochistan, and I thought that in lieu of in the wake of what Nitin has said, I should give a little background. You see, when Liaquat Ali Khan was murdered in Pakistan, it was murdered to shift the gravity of the power in Pakistan from the Muhajirs and the Sindhis, who were the educated communities and were dominating the bureaucracy and so many jobs and all, and take it towards Punjabi Pakistan. Because Pakistan was conceived by the British as Punjab Pakistan based, centric. And they had made their constitution the same way. Liaquat was murdered because he was a Muhajir, and they moved the capital, Karachi, Rawalpindi, and then Islamabad. That's a shortcut. Then after that, The post Liaquat heirs, one or two people, they couldn't control anything, so Ayub Khan stepped in and introduced martial law. Ayub Khan could not manage his country even with martial law, so in about a decade, there's a student revolts on the street. And that is when he calls his general, Yahya Khan, to come into the politics. He steps down and says, you handle it. And before he goes, he abolishes the constitution which they had made in 1956. Now, this is very interesting, and people don't realize it. When Yahya Khan came, and until then, the Baloch people had been treated very badly. Jinnah had promised he'll take care of the province himself, but he and his heirs, they did absolutely nothing. And all these people, the leaders, are mainly in jail. It is General Yahya Khan who calls the Baloch and says, I'm releasing you. You please fight free and fair elections and represent your people in a normal way. I'm giving provincial status to Balochistan for the first time since 1948 annexation. And he does another thing. He abolishes the parity between East Pakistan and West Pakistan, which was that each will have equal number of representation in the National Assembly. And he says it's going to be one man, one vote. This is what gives East Pakistan, the 56% population, the weightage which they won, as Nitin ji has said, in the elections of 1970. And that is how Mujibur Rahman becomes claimant for the prime ministership. And then, of course, the whole Punjabi elite gets after Yahya Khan, and they don't allow it to happen. And the Bangladesh story goes its own way. In the rest of Pakistan, the Baloch have a province, they have an elected government for the first time in history, and they try to have some kind of autonomy. Bhutto doesn't like that either. He gets a new constitution, stringing them along. And in his constitution, he restores the parity for Punjab in Pakistan. So now the Punjabi constitution, the Pakistani constitution in leftover Pakistan gives weightage to Punjab to the extent that Sindh, Balochistan, and Pashtunistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they have less number of seats than Punjab. So you can see that the way it has gone, that breathing space they got was because of Yahya Khan. The second general who tried to be a little decent, was General Zia, and this is again surprising, but for 25 years he ensured that there was not any major genocidal activity under him. So I'll come back now to Balochistan. I can only make some bullet points. One is that I'm sure in recent times everyone has heard of Karima Baloch. She was an activist, and she had become acting chairman of Balochistan Students' Organization Ajaat when the previous chairman was killed. But then the threats to her life, to her family, her colleagues, everything became too much. She ran away to Canada. And there recently she has been found dead in mysterious circumstances. When her body was brought to Balochistan, the police arrested her immediate family members, detained them somewhere far away. Even the mourners were not allowed to attend the funeral at the village, and it was totally controlled by the Pakistan army. So this is what the situation is there in Baloch for activists who actually, as in Bangladesh, they only wanted some human dignity, they only wanted some autonomy, and now the things have gone way beyond that. Karima, her murder follows the murder of Sajid Hussain in Sweden. He was an activist. He was running Baloch online newspaper, Balochistan Times. And Reporters Without Borders say that his killing is reported to his writing because he was writing on drug trafficking, forced disappearances, and the insurgency there. So Karima is famous in India because she sent a Raksha Bandhan message video to the Prime Minister saying that, "You're my brother, please help us." And the Baloch till today are very hopeful that India may or can do something. but we can't say that, it's wrong, we can't press. But the External Affairs Ministry, for the first time, the spokesperson Anurag Srivastav, he condoled her death. This is significant diplomatically. Now, this saga of disappeared people in Balochistan actually began as a notable incident in the middle of the 1970s during the fourth insurgency between 1973 and 78. This was crushed with help from Iran because Pakistani army couldn't do it. The Shah of Iran came to the rescue. He sent his helicopter gunships. He sent his pilots also. He gave $200 million to Bhutto to crush them. And this actually broke the back of the Baloch. They took a very long time to recover from that. I don't know if they're fully recovered even now. We can't list all the victims of this incident, but some important things to be mentioned are Asadullah Mengal is the first person to disappear with his friend in February 1975. He was the son of Ataullah Mengal. Ataullah Mengal, Khair Bakhsh Mari, and Akbar Bhukti were the three great phenomenal figures of early post-independence Balochistan. They are the ones who resisted the state from the day one, and they are the ones who helped spread the arc of resistance till the point when the middle class in Balochistan, the educated people, came forward. People like Dr. Allah Nazar and those people, they are all middle class people. They are not elite, tribal elite or feudal families. And they have taken the movement now to a new phase. The worst period for Balochistan was General Musharraf. He wanted to exploit the resources. And Balochistan is a very sparsely populated region. It's 44% of Pakistan's landmass, but barely 4 to 6% of the population. So they can never that way match the Bangladesh phenomenon, where the populousness of the place gave them the ability to break away. But Balochistan is very rich. There's gold, copper, natural oil, natural gas. There's chromite, there's a number, marble, there's any number of rare minerals which are very valuable. And so that extraction is being taken place. They're not getting enough royalty from that wealth to basically even develop their roads, forget about other things. So that resentment has become a very burning issue with the Baloch today. It is General Musharraf who gave Gwadar Post to China in 2002. And he started the phenomena of expropriating the Baloch from their land. If people have lived for centuries in a backward area, they don't have land records, they don't have property papers. That system doesn't exist. They've just thrown out people, military cantonments, civilian housing, all kinds of things has taken place. It is absolutely the biggest land robbery in history, according to Robert Kaplan, who went there in 2009. Now it's even worse. And the Makran coast, whole of Balochistan, the southern border is the Makran coast. There you have cantonments, you have bases, you have all kinds of things. The fishermen, it's the best fishing area in the world, and the fishermen have been thrown away from the East Bay, which is the best place, and for fishing. And these are poor people. They live on that. They feed their families on that. This kind of marginalization of communities is going on in Balochistan since then. The worst sufferers of the American war on terror were the Baloch, because Pakistan got money, Pakistan got arms, and they diverted a huge part of it to harass the Baloch. And worst is that the Americans set up bases in Balochistan, Pasni, Gwadar, Dalbandin, also Jacobabad in Sindh. And then these bases, in spite of these bases being used against the Taliban found it easy to come into Quetta from Afghanistan as a safe haven. So Taliban was a target in the war on terror, and it is coming into Balochistan. It's spread there quite a bit. So this kind of irony is going on because of duplicity of the Pakistan polity also. One thing they used their wealth for was to give this Fazlul Rahman, his Jamiatul Ulema Hind, free hand to enter the Baloch areas, to build madrasas, to radicalize the population, and that has gone very far. The Balochistan Liberation Army and the Balochistan Liberation Front, these are guerrilla groups and there are many others, they have risen out of the resistance to this activity and they are fighting it. But the fighting is uneven because they are disadvantaged and it is very, very brutal. Now, in 2005, January, one lady, Sindhi doctor, Khalida, Shazia Khalid, she was raped by an army doctor whom she named. He was not arrested till today. He was allowed to come on television and give his own side of the story. And the whole society was enraged. Now, because Sui gas is located in the Bukti area, and Nawab Akbar Bukti was the supremo of the area, very widely respected till today, he said this is an affront on Baloch honor because we really respect women, we cannot tolerate this. So his people, they started firing on the military facilities in their area, and the matters escalated. It became very big. Pakistan brought helicopter gunfights. They bought F-16 fighter jets. They brought in heavy artillery against civilians. Everyone else is civilian. Lots of Hindu homes were there. Then even the opposition, that is the PPP, Sherry Rahman and all, they said in parliament that this is genocide of innocent civilians. You can't do this. But it continued. This fighting went on for a very long time, which shows you the nature of Baloch resistance. That's what I'm trying to say. In August 2006, almost a year and a half later, Nawab Akbar Bukti was cornered in a cave, invited for negotiations, and then he died. Obviously, he was killed, but that's never been admitted. Musharraf later said it was an accident, somebody blew up, my soldiers also died. All that's nonsense. But Bukti's body was not given to his family. It was, the cremation was done by the army in tight security, which is resented to this day. So this phenomena of abducting youth in hundreds and thousands, especially the activists and the intellectuals, really took on a new dimension in the Musharraf era. It really went up. And then among those arrested in this era was Dr. Allah Nazar, who's now very famous as one of the leading guerrillas against this movement. He was released only because he was believed that he's going to die. And then he disappeared into the mountains and led a major movement, which we are looking for the results now. Another major factor in this time, everybody may have heard of Mama Qadir. He came here for medical treatment to India. He began a movement called International Voice for Baloch Missing Persons, with some other people whose family members had gone missing. He even marched 3,000 miles within Pakistan up to Islamabad to protest. And of course, they were turning a blind eye to what he was doing and saying. Qadir's own son was just a 23-year-old young man. He was abducted from their own home in Quetta. And then 3 years later, they found his body riddled with bullets, riddled with bones, drilled with, you can imagine the horror of it. And this kill and dump has become the new trend in Pakistan with the Baloch. Human Rights Watch and all kinds of organizations have condemned this. They have said that the major victims, most of the victims belong to Baloch Republican Party, Baloch National Front, Baloch National Movement, Baloch Students Organization, Baloch National Party. So it's very political, the targeting of young activists of this organization. Kill and dump was officially recognized by Human Rights Watch in July 2011. It is 9 years ago. Then the phenomenon, in 2012, the world noticed that Baloch killings have spread to Sindh. Now, the point is that Baloch who were under pressure in Balochistan used to go to Sindh for relief. But now the pursuers followed them there, and they were butchered there. Braham Dag Bukti, he's the grandson of Nawab Akbar Bukti. He had to escape when he was being targeted. Hivyar Murray, the Murray brothers had to escape. And their family members here, Braham Dag's sister and her 14-year-old daughter, they were killed in Karachi. And their one driver was killed, but one maid was left alive, maid. So that was a message that we are finishing certain people. Jan Muhammad Mari, he was the right-hand man of the great Khair Bakhsh Mari. He was also killed in Karachi, and the body was taken and dumped in hub area of Balochistan. Then somebody working, Faisal Mengal, he was working for an NGO in Karachi, but he was killed there, and then his body was thrown in Balochistan. In 2013, the Attorney General of Pakistan informed the Supreme Court that 400 million from the Intelligence Bureau's secret fund has gone into counterinsurgency in Balochistan between 2008 and 9, just those 2 years. These funds appear to have been used for setting up death squads, and because this is the time of the maximum killings that took place in Balochistan. This Shafiq Mengal, one of their trained killers, he has an organization. He admitted killing 6 journalists in Kuzdar and many activists of the BNP, and there are others who have done more killing. In 2014, mass graves were found in Kuzdar district, which witnesses said Shafiq Mengal was behind it, and because he was having a camp in the area where the bodies were found. And now recently, in the last few years, families have started complaining that when they receive a body of their family member, either from the military or they find it, they're told somebody is dumped somewhere, they find missing organs. Now, the suspicion is that this is organ harvesting of living people and who are then dumped. But bodies have been found without heart, lungs, intestines, and eyeballs. Very grim. Now, I'll be concluding. Dr. Abdul Manan, Secretary General of the Baloch National Movement, he said in January 2016, he was killed in Mustang because he was opposing the China-Pakistan economic corridor. This is the new focus of resistance, by the way, of all the Baloch groups, because they feel that this will expropriate them from their land completely and forever, and they will also, they will become also a minority in their own land unless the worst thing happens that they are expelled completely from the land itself. So he said that, his successor said, Pakistan is continuing the kill and dump with impunity because the international community is not taking note of it. This was said by the previous speaker also, and this is a fact. It is very interesting that very shamelessly Major General Asif Ghafoor, the Director General, Inter-Services Public Relations, admitted to Hamid Mir on a television program that, we don't want anyone to go missing and all that, but this all is fair in love and war. War occurs to be ruthless. Now, finally, Dr. Nasir Dashti is one of the leading scholars of the Baloch, also in exile. He says that this targeting of the cream of Baloch society is on the par with what happened in East Pakistan. Over the last 2 decades, several Baloch political activists, intellectuals, doctors, engineers, artists, journalists, and tribal elders, they have been taken away by intelligence agencies and the military and never found again or found dead. And this has been well documented by International Crisis Group, Amnesty International, International Committee of Red Cross, Asian Human Rights Commission, UN High Commission for Refugees, Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, and various Baloch human rights groups. So all I can say in conclusion is that the Balochistan is a very sad saga. And as of now, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, from Bangladesh to Balochistan, I think the story is same. Killings, rapes, loot of natural resources, and even the media is not spared. So, what we stand for is that all such acts should be taken note of by the world community, and we will keep on working on that direction. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, he was supposed to come here, but due to COVID-19 restrictions, he could not come all the way from UK. He's Robert John Blackman, a British parliamentarian who is known for his love for India, and in fact, India reciprocated with the Padamshree to him. So since he's not here, but he has sent a message, a recorded message for the audience. Now I would like to request technical team to play the recording.
Holocaust Memorial Day in the United Kingdom is commemorated as being the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau by the British Army towards the end of the Second World War. But as you quite rightly say, it is not just the Holocaust where we commemorate the death of 6 million Jews at the hands of the Nazis, but we also look at all the other genocides and attempted genocides across the world. And clearly at this time, we also therefore remember the attacks that have been made on the Kashmiri Pandits, on the Dogra community in Jammu Kashmir. So we must remember that from the time of partition in 1947, the attacks on people from the Hindu population and other religious minorities in the Kashmir Valley extended right the way through. And unfortunately, when we look at partition, we think of India, Pakistan being created. We then, of course, had the Liberation War for Bangladesh in 1971. But during the whole of that period of time, we also have to commemorate the bravery of the Indian Army, who initially, back in 1947, had to go in and resist the Pakistani brigands who'd invaded Jammu Kashmir in an attempt to divide the princely state of Jammu Kashmir into separate parts. We then, of course, have seen over the years, I'm afraid, the various different wars that have been fought between India and Pakistan, and also the illegal occupation of a sovereign part of India by the Pakistani military, the Pakistani occupied Kashmir, and the sponsorship of terrorism across the line of control. The line of control, of course, being the longest line of control anywhere in the world, occupying more troops on both sides of the line of control in trying to police it. And remember that we have at least 45 terrorist bases based in the illegally occupied part of Kashmir by Pakistan, where terrorism is sponsored and promoted to attack the people of Jammu Kashmir. We must also, of course, commemorate the dreadful day back in 1990, when the Kashmiri Pandits were forced to, in an exodus from the valley, from their historical home that had been their home for thousands of years. When the message went out from the various different mosques, the message which was clear and amplified of leave, convert, or die, with a very simple message. And we know, commemorate those hundreds, if not thousands, of people that lost their lives. Of course, those people that left are still refugees, whether they are refugees in Jammu or whether they've moved further or across the world. We must commemorate those brave individuals who stand up for the course of history. And we should be clear, this was an attempt to wipe out the Kashmiri Pandits and indeed to forcibly convert the women and to change the valley from being a multi-religious valley in favor of one religion only. Irrespective of one's views about different religions, it cannot be acceptable that people are persecuted for following their religion. And I think this is the message that we must impart to the world, that this was a way of ethnic cleansing and of genocide in the Kashmir Valley. And we must also remember that the Kashmir Valley is a very small part of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. It is, after all, the decision made by the Maharaja back in 1947 that the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir should be a part of sovereign India. Ladakh as an area, of course, is predominantly Buddhist. Jammu is predominantly Hindu. And now, of course, Kashmir is predominantly Muslim. But that doesn't mean anything for anyone really, because India is a secular state where people can celebrate their religion irrespective of what it is, and are safeguarded by the constitution. The same cannot be said for Pakistan or for the illegal occupied area by Pakistan of Jammu and Kashmir. And I'm afraid still I receive on a regular basis the reports of attacks on minorities. This is completely and utterly unacceptable. And we who prize the fact that we can celebrate our religion in peace and harmony, call out the attacks on the minorities and say this must not be allowed to happen. If it does happen, then we must call it out for what it is, and that is attacks on religious minorities, and make sure that the world knows about each and every one of those attacks so that people are safeguarded in their own homes and in their own place of living. And the very sad fact is, in the Kashmir Valley, I think I'm the last serving British Member of Parliament to actually visit Srinagar back in February 2016. And the most heartening thing, that despite everything that's gone on, what people were crying out for was peace and security in the valley, so that the economy could be recovered, that the opportunities for tourism, with a beautiful part of the world, the opportunities for agriculture, handicrafts, hydroelectric power to be generated, and indeed, of course, having a smart city which would benefit everyone, regardless of their religion, regardless of their background. And I had the privilege of meeting people from all the various different religions. And it was probably the most heartening fact of my visit that despite all that had gone on, people still wanted not only to live in the valley, but wanted the valley to be safe and a safe place for everyone to return. So we must remember what happened, and we must commemorate the martyrs, but also look to the future and the opportunities there are if there only can be peace and security. That peace and security can only come if Pakistan desists from sponsoring terrorism and dismantles those bases. The Pakistani military should leave their illegal occupation, and India then could resume complete control of the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir for the benefit of the entire population. And of course, we've heard only just recently further fighting between the brave Indian forces and those of China, who occupy illegally once again part of Ladakh, part of Jammu and Kashmir, the princely state. And those people, those brave soldiers, deserve our utmost respect. Very sadly, again, I understand that some have lost their lives in defending their country. And it's a great shame that these military incursions are still taking place by China into sovereign Indian territory. I've moved an early day motion in the UK Parliament, as you quite rightly say. This is an expression of political belief and has garnered support from several different political parties, I'm pleased to say. And essentially, what we should see is the Genocide Act enacted by the Indian government. I'm a big supporter of the government of India, but I think there is a need now to actually enact that act. It's not for me or the UK Parliament to tell the Indian government what to do, but just to express our support for that Genocide Act, so that the people who very sadly lost their lives are commemorated. The people that lost their territory and their homes are also properly compensated and given the right to return to their ancestral home if they so choose. And I think these two things, I think, are vitally important. And what I do know about more than anything about India is, of course, that everyone prides themselves on the Indian constitution and the sensible measures that the Indian government took about removing Article 370 and the other amendments to the constitution, which only affected Jammu and Kashmir, gave special rights on a so-called temporary basis that lasted for 70 years, suggests to me that this brings in line the Constitution of India to the entirety of India. And that's absolutely the right thing to do. I think it's absolutely right that we should see a position of the Genocide Act brought in, and obviously the consequences of that enacted in the Indian Parliament and beyond. And I would be very pleased if the Indian government do this for the benefit, particularly of all those people of Indian origin who live in the United Kingdom and who look to India as a bastion of democracy, of secularism, and the opportunity to celebrate their faith in peace and harmony. Well, clearly we have to understand the basis of it. And much of it comes from people who convert to a particular fundamental religion, and it becomes all-encompassing. It encompasses their entirety of their lives, and they become, shall we say, more fanatical as a result of converting to that religion. So that's the first thing to say. The second is that there are many people who can be influenced by their religious leaders and by others to do things they would not do otherwise, to sacrifice themselves in the name of jihad, I'm afraid, to commit violence against other people. That is something that we should not allow to foster and to grow. We, as governments go, governments must combat this in every shape or form, and call out those religious leaders in particular who inspire others to commit acts of violence on their behalf. I think that's a vitally important aspect of democracy in this world. And it's very important that examples are set and followed right across the world. There is an age-old truism that some people say that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, and this is always the challenge that exists. It clearly depends on the circumstances of often of the victors. The victors that call themselves freedom fighters, those that are not victorious are the terrorists. So we have to be careful about how we define these particular issues, but clearly the people that rise up against the state, in particular where there is a democracy, but people that rise up and use violence to achieve their aims are quite clearly terrorists, and we need to call them out for that. Unfortunately, terrorism is rife throughout the world, and people can be inspired to commit terrorist atrocities for all sorts of reasons. I happen to believe that it's not the fault of a religion that people commit terrorism. It is a fault of religious leaders who inspire individuals to commit these acts of terror. And therefore, it's incumbent upon those religious leaders to actually preach non-violence, to preach the capability of living side by side in harmony with one another and respecting one another's religions, one another's beliefs. There is in a democracy, there is a way of achieving power, and that is via the ballot box. And if you can't achieve it through the ballot box, clearly that leads to frustrations. But those frustrations, I'm afraid, have to be that you've got to win hearts and minds and not commit acts of violence against them. Well, obviously, India has been, unfortunately, the victim of many acts of terrorism over the years, as has the United Kingdom. I do know that, very sadly, of course, because of this dreadful pandemic, our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, could not visit India for Republic Day, which is a great shame for everyone. Let us hope that that visit can happen very soon, once we are over our respective peaks of this virus. Our Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, was in India at the beginning of January. I believe a very successful visit. Not very. It wasn't very prominent in the media during that time, but clearly there's a huge opportunity for international trade between the UK and India. India now is the second biggest investor in the United Kingdom, and the UK is the sixth biggest investor in India. We need to up our game and against the competition in India. But also we can cooperate in the fields of defence, particularly, I suspect, in the operation. This is a cooperation between nations. This is not, the master servant or colonial way. However, using our Royal Navy in particular and our expertise in combating terrorism, we can have defence cooperation, we can have security cooperation, and indeed we can have other elements of diplomatic means of combating the type of illegal action that we're talking about. I take the view of saying that there is a clear cooperation between many countries, be it the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, Israel, the free world, essentially, cooperating together to combat the forces of evil that exist, I'm afraid, around the world. And I think by doing so, it will be to our mutual advantage, because clearly there are, I'm afraid, there are powers that seek to use the opportunity of undermining the democracy in India, and indeed attacking India both militarily and also in trade. And I think why we have to be quite clear that we are going to combat that. We are partners now in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. It is absolutely right that in the Commonwealth we should cooperate together. I think that I've got a message of hope. I think you live in a land of beautiful scenery, the opportunities for tourism, the opportunities for using the handicrafts and the agriculture, and indeed generating your own power, electricity through hydroelectric power. Fantastic opportunity for Jammu and Kashmir to be literally. I mean, it is the. We always talk about it, the Venice of Asia, and indeed it has the opportunity, I think, to be that. And so I think the message is that everyone has to understand that if there is peace and security, then great things can flow and everyone can flourish. There is no reason why people cannot live beside each other, irrespective of their religions, going forward. And that is what I hope to see happen, because after all, Jammu and Kashmir is the jewel in the Crown of India. And I think it's just a great shame, a great pity that that for so long it's not been able to reach its full potential. So I think the message is clear that good times potentially are on their way. What we do need is everyone to cooperate and agree to coexist rather than to fight each other. I think there is a great opportunity, and it's up to all of us to encourage that opportunity to be grasped by all concerned. I think the reality is that where acts of violence are committed against people, then clearly there must be a way of bringing those people to justice and bringing and calling them to account. The United Kingdom has always stood for fundamental freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, and the freedom to reach your full potential. It's one of the reasons why so many people of Indian origin have chosen to come and live in the United Kingdom, because we operate in that way. And the people that have come have really not only made it their home, they are now the backbone of the economy of the United Kingdom. And so therefore, there is absolutely every reason why we should be cooperating very closely together, build on our friendship, build on the opportunities of the relationships between our respective prime ministers, and make sure that actually we collectively deliver for the people of our great countries, and to do so on a partnership basis, which after all is the best way of delivering things, where people are seen as being equal partners, not one dominating the other. I think there's a great opportunity here but it's up to us to grasp and take it on in the right sort of way. And the only disappointing thing about this COVID, well, one of the most disappointing things, I suppose, but the most disappointing thing about this COVID crisis is that I can't come and join you in India because of the restrictions on travel. I hope that we will soon get over this and that I'll be able to come back and see it firsthand once again, the beauty of the valley, the city of temples of Jammu, and indeed see some of Ladakh, because I've been to Jammu and Kashmir. I've not been to Ladakh, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of that as well. And then, of course, I'm also, as you quite rightly say, been honoured by the President of India, having been made a Padamshree. And so far, unfortunately, the ceremony had to be cancelled last year. So eventually we'll have to have a ceremony in Delhi for me to receive that honour from the President. And it's only disappointing that I've not been able to visit and celebrate with you all, as I'm sure that you would all wish.
A big thanks to Bob Blackman, the British parliamentarian, for his words. What he spoke was mainly about Jammu and Kashmir, because that is another region which has faced a lot. And one of our speakers, he will certainly go into details. But before we move forward, what Bob Blackman has said gives us a reason to say something from this stage. We want to create an international alliance for prevention of genocide. So this is our main concern. So we want to propose to the world community that unless and until there is an international alliance for prevention of genocide, we cannot live in peace. When I say international alliance, it has to be international in the true sense of the word. It can't be international if we consider the religious background of the victim, if we consider the regional background of the victim, if we consider financial status of the victim. A victim is a victim irrespective of all these things. So from this stage, we want to just propose this thing to the world community, although it's just a humble beginning, but certainly with the international community coming in support of this idea. I think it is possible to make it a reality. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Mr. Bashir Assad. He's an author and a journalist. He's a writer of a book called K-File, The Conspiracy of Silence. Mr. Bashir Assad.
Distinguished co-panelists and dear audience, a very warm good evening to all of you. A lot has been said and written and spoken about Kashmir. And in fact, all the friends sitting over here would agree that the terms like genocide, Holocaust, crackdown, etc., every Kashmiri is familiar with these terms. It started with the forced exodus of Kashmiri Pandits from that place, and then many things followed. Unfortunately, we have been very selective and subjective in portraying the picture of Kashmir over the last 30 years. I had my own considerations and my own prejudices and biases. So, in fact, an agenda. So, Mr. Sushil Pandit sitting over here, he had his own biases and prejudices, and so we kept brushing under the carpet certain things and spoke about many things according to our convenience. That said, I don't want to repeat what Dr. Chrungoo has written or what I have written about or on Kashmir. I think post August 5, 2019, the scenario has changed, and now a host of measures should be actually taken to end this bloody conflict in Kashmir, which is orchestrated, engineered, sponsored by Pakistan. There's hardly any doubt about it. Where we are lagging far behind is actually about the management of perceptions in Kashmir, sir. That is something which actually disturbs me individually and personally. Because every gruesome act committed by the other side is being attributed to the security forces or to Indian intelligence agencies, etc., etc. And till date, we have no mechanism, institutional mechanism in place to counter this propaganda in Kashmir. Let's talk about 2019 happenings in Kashmir. From local to national to international media, everybody kept talking about clampdown, curfew, harassment, etc., etc. When you look at the statistics, you will find out that, yes, of course, at the beginning, the administration took some very harsh measures to restrict the movement of people in order to maintain law and order in the streets of Jammu and Kashmir Valley. But it was September 3rd when the state administration started withdrawing the restrictions and tried to bring some kind of normalcy in the streets. But the other side took advantage of it and they played it fully. They issued threats, they killed, they maimed people, they destroyed properties, they killed fruit growers, they killed fruit merchants, they killed truck drivers, they killed non-resident laborers. But the narrative remained the same. Indian state has oppressed and suppressed, and it has muzzled the voices in Kashmir. Nobody is being allowed to talk about this thing or that thing, etc., etc. The statistics suggest that around 48 killings happened during that period to December 2019, and all the killings were actually committed by the terrorist groups. But nobody spoke about it, nobody wrote about it. So what we actually need to do in Kashmir is to somehow change the perception. And how you will change the perception? You need to propagate your ideas. You need to counter that deadly ideology which emanates from the soil of Pakistan, which has contaminated the atmosphere in Jammu and Kashmir. You need to counter that vociferously by employing all the resources available with the state. One. Recently, District Development Council elections were held in Jammu and Kashmir. The participation was impressive. Of course, again, I should admit that, yes, the other side, the Pakistan was somehow, they allowed it to happen. Otherwise, one single killing of a contestant, it would have derailed the process. But they allowed it to happen because the so-called mainstream political parties, they had just formed that PAGD kind of thing, and the narrative was the same which the separatists would have propagated during that period if they were allowed to do so. So Pakistan allowed them to propagate that idea because somehow it was close to whatever they wanted in Kashmir ideologically or to keep their narrative relevant in Kashmir. What does that mean? That simply means we are talking about the rigging of election of 1987, and since 1990, Pakistan and its proxies in Jammu and Kashmir have been continuously rigging the elections, manipulating, putting into practice all the machinations, issuing threats. And now, after the formation of People's Democratic Party in 1999, we actually institutionalized these machinations. You know, one of the youth activists of People's Democratic Party was arrested during that period. And there was a hue and cry in the national media that it is a politically motivated thing, and Mr. Falana has been arrested only to muzzle the voices, only to push the so-called mainstream political parties to corner. Nobody actually tried to go to the genesis of the problem, what has happened and what is happening in Kashmir. That political party, headed by Mahbooba Mufti, they have created a nexus with the terrorists, with Pakistan-sponsored elements and all that. And that guy was one of the main instruments for Mahbooba in hobnobbing and harboring with the terrorists in Kashmir. And we ignored it, national media ignored it. Even there was some kind of pressure built on the government agencies to take a lenient view. When the fact remains that in South Kashmir alone, we see a pattern how the people come out to vote. It is always calculated. They don't allow the massive participation. This guy has been, it is now proved beyond any doubt. There are both material and circumstantial evidences which suggest that this guy, since 2010, he has been working on this project of how to use the terrorists and the separatist elements to influence the outcome of elections in Kashmir, particularly in South Kashmir. But no, hue and cry, people trying to discredit the process, trying to discredit the institutions, accusing it and abusing it like anything that somebody, some icon has been arrested merely on the pretext that he is very close to Mahbooba Mufti, which is not the case. So the point here I'm trying to make is that things in Kashmir should now change. One, my team at Mac Letter, some of them sitting over here, very recently came out with a story. In fact, it was in a sense, it was very revealing. We have a lone so-called communist leader in Kashmir. And whole of the nation sees in him a true nationalist. Of course, he has helped a lot in early 90s when he started his political career as a legislator. In recently held elections, somebody told me that his son is mowing freely in Kulgam district, which is very vulnerable, highly infested, during the night time also, and it is something very interesting, very strange. When the contestants who are contesting the elections, they are put in security hazards and security zones. They are not being allowed to move freely, to come out of the security hazards and go for the campaigning. How his son is moving during the night time. So we tried to investigate it, and something very startling came out. This gentleman too is on the mission of hobnobbing and harboring the terrorists. When I tried to confirm it from the state police and the intelligence agencies, they admitted that, of course, he is enjoying some kind of control over stone pelters in his area. Sandhya, you will be surprised. So if this is the situation, how you will deal with it? Actually, the main thrust should be how to draw some red lines. What is acceptable and what is not. If you don't do that, you will finally come to the same situation we were confronted with during 90s and also during the recent times like 2016, 2010. If these red lines are not there, you can't differentiate who is the friend and who is the enemy of the nation, enemy of the country. And when you say that enemy of the nation, that it should be seen as enemy of the people of Kashmir. We need to prove it that Pakistan is not the enemy of India. I have been insisting on it that we should change this vocabulary and terminology and phraseology. People from New Delhi, North Block and South Block coming to Kashmir and Pakistan, desh ka dushman hai. No, we should be saying that Pakistan, Kashmir ka dushman hai. Only then you can change the perception. You can make a difference. The posturing should be something, it should be in a way that we need to convince the people in Kashmir that Pakistan is your enemy. It is your enemy first, and later enemy of the country. Third important thing is that the system has been intruded in Kashmir. You will be surprised. We were also working on a story where there were many instances where people quoted the polling staff abusing and accusing the voters. Polling staff actually abusing the voters, cursing them. Why did you come out to vote? And who is there sitting over in that polling station? It's a government employee. It is A, B, C, D. And who are they? We need to do the profiling. Of course, the state administration is actually taking some measures, but we need to have some kind of political narrative around this also. As far as these the killings by the terrorists are concerned, it has certainly some kind of social sanction. And where from this social sanction comes? In early 80s, actually the extremist religious groups, they had their own mouthpieces and organs. And their ideologues would keep writing in those organs and mouthpieces. Very systematically, those writers, they intruded into the mainstream media in Kashmir. They started writing opinion pieces in vernaculars, giving sermons. Some university professors were there who started writing on Islamization, not on Islam itself, not on the Sufi Islam we are familiar with, the most tolerant cult of Islam. They started writing on Islamization, they started writing on jihad, they started writing on caliphate, and it became the mainstream media. Then, because there was a huge conflict industry, the vernaculars intentionally, deliberately, and conveniently allowed it to happen. पैसा आता है, मज़ा है, लीडरी भी है. So they allowed it. This time, I mean, every Kashmiri is alleging that it is the national media who are actually instigating and provoking the people in Kashmir. Partially true. Partially true. The second part of the truth is that it is the local media who only propagated this ideology, this deadly ideology, who became actually party to this ideology, who propagated this ideology. Let me tell you something very interesting. Some 1 or 2 months back, I suppose just 2 months back, it was LET, perhaps. LET issued a threat warrant to some journals, including myself. Before that, some 2 or 3 journals were questioned by the Jammu and Kashmir, by the cyber wing of Jammu and Kashmir police, yes, for posting, that some kind of material on their social media platforms, handles. Now a terrorist organization is issuing threat to some journalists, and there is nobody to speak about it. Nobody. In New Delhi, there was none. In Srinagar, none. And believe me, we didn't talk to each other even. None among them tried to ring his other companion in this endeavor. Nobody. Yesterday we were at Raj Bhavan. A couple of journalist friends met me there. Nobody spoke about it, as if it was not a concern. When you are facing this kind of situation in Kashmir, how will you change it? So you need to do something as far as changing the mindset is concerned. And I have been suggesting that if somebody is issuing a threat from that place, if he is identifying Mr. A, let me identify Mr. B, who is collaborating with the enemy. What is preventing me from identifying Mr. B? So some measures that would actually help in addressing these kind of concerns. And fourth important thing is that every second day, before these elections, every second day, terrorists would kill Mr. A or Mr. B. And it has been happening there since early 90. Police comes out with a statement that a sit has been constituted which will investigate it. And honestly, not a single civilian killing has been investigated in Kashmir so far. If you want to break the ecosystem, if you want to break the support structure, then you need to investigate every single killing perpetrated and committed by the terrorists. Because it is not the terrorist alone who would come and kill a person. There is a support system. There is somebody called OGW. There is somebody who is providing logistics and all that. You need to investigate it, and that would perhaps end this cycle of violence in Kashmir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was really enlightening, and it gave us a new perspective about the Kashmir issue. Now, moving on, I would request Dr. Nuzhat Chaudhary. She's from Bangladesh, and she's working for justice to the victims in Bangladesh. Please, ma'am.
Distinguished panelists and respected guests, all of you are sitting here are scholars and intellectuals, but above all, passionate human beings who want to save another human being from being the victim of a genocide. I don't know how many of you are related to any of the photographs shown here or there. I'm the only person probably who's related to two of the photographs. You'll see a brick field where bodies are lying. It's written Hindu intellectuals are killed. I have already talked to the organizers that my father was a Muslim. He was a Muslim doctor, eye doctor, one of the best indeed in Bangladesh. No, he wasn't killed in the initial part of the war. He was killed he was picked up. His name was enlisted. He was picked up from his home by the collaborators, al-Badrs of the Pakistani army. On the 15th of December, when surrender was already negotiated. On the 16th, there will be surrender. On the 16th morning, just as the sunrise on a victorious Bangladesh, Victory Day, 16th December was coming up, my father's life was ending. I don't come here as a scholar. I haven't written books. I'm not a journalist. What I'll tell you from the perspective of a victim's daughter. I'm the daughter of a victim of genocide, so I speak from my blood. Three million people were killed, not 200,000, not 400,000. The worst thing for a genocide victim or the families of a genocide victim is to see that the genocide is forgotten and Bangladesh genocide is one. But worst still is when it is misrepresented, and especially when misrepresented favoring the perpetrators. Pakistan would like you to forget it. That is what they say in Bangladesh. Let us move on. Past is past. Bygone is bygone. We are Muslim brothers. You killed my father. You did not ask for apology. You did not pay our dues, shares. You have not faced the criminal court. We have not received justice. There is no healing unless there is a closure. I'm a doctor. A wound will only heal if it is closed properly. Pakistan would have you forget it. But worse yet, if you remember, because my friends do remember, India remembers, because you have 16,000 Indian soldiers martyred in our war. They are our freedom fighters. They are our martyrs, and we salute them. So you will occasionally remember. But because the voice of the perpetrator is so strong, even our friends utter the numbers wrong. Even our friends describe the scenario wrong. It hurts. It deeply hurts. You'll see a girl's picture outside, Purnima. She's my friend. She was raped, and now during the election crisis in 2001, she's an activist now. She's an activist in Nirmul Committee, where I'm the Assistant General Secretary. But if you portray it from a perpetrator's aspect, you are doing a great disservice to the victims. If you remember, then Pakistan would want you to remember that only some 27,000, at best some 100,000 people were killed. They were Hindus, and they were collaborating with India for a separate country. It was a separatist movement. Or at best, they would want you to understand it was a civil war. It was not. Take it from a national hero's daughter. Take it from a martyr's daughter. It was not a separatist movement. In 1970s election, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman won, not only here in East Pakistan, Didan East Pakistan, but also some seats over there. So he was the majority leader. He was the legitimate prime minister. So when, on the 25th, there was no law and order situation. So on the 7th, Bangabandhu gave a brilliant speech. We knew it was a great signal, but he did not actually ask for a separatist land. No, he did not. He called for, like a Gandhi, he stood up and called for non-cooperation. We were not abiding by the Pakistani law because ours should have been the legitimate government. Then, on the 25th, when the crackdown began, when Mujibnagar Sarkar then formed in April, when Bangabandhu called for independence, then Mujibnagar Sarkar became the legitimate government of Bangladesh. It wasn't a separatist movement. It was a legitimate war of independence of a victorious, democratically elected majority people by the democratically elected head. All the participants of Mujibnagar Sarkar were our elected members. They were elected in a free and fair election. And that, by forming that, and declaration of independence, Pakistan becomes an occupying force. We were never a separatist movement. We were never a civil war. It was a war of independence, and I want my friends here to narrate our story like it was in fact. Also, Pakistan would, if you remember, they would want you to forget, but if you remember, please remember it was only 26,000. No, it wasn't. How come? As if killing 10 people is any worse than killing 10,000 people. One life is 100%. 10,000 people is no more important than one person. Every life matters. And in the definition of genocide, no matter how many people you kill, but when you kill for a reason like ethnicity, religion, whatever, with the intention of eliminating that group of people, it's genocide. But then again, they would want you to believe it was the Hindus they were trying to kill. No. They were trying to eliminate Bengalis, Bangali. We were all fighting for a land, free land for the Bengalis. They weren't only, they would want you to believe that. They want that narration. Unfortunately, even our friends say that narration. If you say they were killing only Hindus, then they give a color of religion in it. No. I'll give you a list of intellectuals that were picked up, not randomly killed, picked up, enlisted and picked up. Majority were Muslims. Yes, they were Hindus, but they were Christians as well and Buddhists as well. So they would want you to believe that the Hindus who collaborated with India, that's why we had to stamp down on these miscreants. No, these were legitimately elected Bengali people, irrespective of their religion, stood up for a free land so that they can call their mother in their own tongue, Ma. Please, please do not let anybody misrepresent our history. When you talk about genocide, always stand with the victims. When you say that there were 6 million Jews were killed, do you go to find the registry where it was written? Do you even ask for a registry, or do you ask the Germans for their version? So in our case, why do you want to minimize the number? And again, by minimizing number, does it minimize the crime? It doesn't. 3 million of Bangladeshis were killed. I want our friends in India to know this number. 30 lakh shohid. This is what we called. And this is what the world should call. But world prefers to forget. There was an international conference. They were talking about rape as a victim, as a tool of a weapon of war. Not a mention of the women that were raped. Not only Hindu women, again. Muslims, I know. I mix with them. I work in a platform that is formed by the widows, the rape victims, the Mukti Jodhas. I speak from personal experience. When you distort and propagate what our perpetrators want the world to know, then they are empowering the perpetrators, and you are dampening the already feeble voice of our victims. Victims' voice needs to be heard, and the story of any genocide needs to be told from the victim's point of view. Any story of any genocide needs to be told from the point of view of the victim. Another thing, if you walk around here and see the pictures, you'll think as if in Bangladesh, the Hindus are persecuted all the time. If this is the picture you portray, then you are alienating the secular force that are trying so hard to keep the country in a secular path. You will empower those who want you to believe that there is anarchy and wants Bangladesh to fail. Purnima happened in BNP Jamaat's era. Who is BNP Jamaat? Jamaat is formed by the war criminals. BNP also has the war criminals. These are the parties that came after the killing of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. After that, Zia formed BNP, and this BNP Jamaat is now alliance that propagates the religious extremist political system that is Bangabandhu's daughter, Sheikh Hasina, is trying so hard to fight. So then you'll ask me, then Sheikh Hasina has been in power since 2008, there is 2012, 2014. See the numbers during all election time. Then BNP Jamaat again comes back with their aggression. But not only against the Hindus. That is something I want to tell you. Humayun Ajaat, our progressive leader, he was killed. In Boi Mela, he was chopped. Dipon Prakashok, a publisher of books. He was killed. It is another form of intellectual killing, irrespective of religion. Yes, some of them, Hindus, of course, but also anybody who is a free thinker, or by whom? That element that killed my father. Because why? Why is Pakistani army still doing the same thing they did in East Pakistan in Baluchistan? Why are Jamaat still doing this religious extremism? Because they were never brought to justice. This is the most important point for genocide victims. The perpetrators must be brought to justice. Pakistan needs to be tried. The generals, Pakistani generals who killed and maimed in East Pakistan went back to their country, and they were not tried, they were not punished. Now look, they are again doing it to another part of their country. Jamaat was not tried. Bangabandhu started 72 tribunals. He was killed in 75. And after that, who came to power? I saw my father's killer being the minister. There was prime minister, president, Rajakars, Al-Badrs, Pakistani collaborators for 21 years. That is the narrative they want you to believe. And that is what they created. But then Bangabandhu's daughter came. And she's trying so hard. And Bangladesh, I tell you categorically, is maybe a Muslim majority country. Yes, we are a Muslim majority country, but we are secular country. That is what we strive to be. That is why 30 lakh people laid down their life for a secular, democratic, progressive country, Bengal, Shonar Bangla. That's what we fought for, and we'll fight till our death to keep it secular. But we need our friends to appreciate our effort. We need our friends to see beyond the propaganda and give us support. You need to help us get recognition for our genocide. The larger community, global community, still do not recognize Bangladesh genocide as a genocide. Why do you think that is? Because Pakistan is the lucky country that had the support of not only the Western countries, Kissinger and Nixon, but also the Islamic countries and also China. The globe was behind Pakistan, but we fought. We fought with our three rifles. India, of course, was a good friend, but they came in quite late, in December. We fought. Our farmers, our laborers, our students, they fought and formed Mukti Bahini. I was present when General Jacob was given that Liberation War honor. I was an anchor of that show. And he came and saluted Mukti Bahini and said they were cornered, all the Pakistani army in certain pockets, and all we had to do was get Dhaka, ensure Dhaka's fall, and everything fell. He was giving credit to Mukti Bahini. Our friends need to realize what we went through. And still, the world do not recognize us. And even those who do, somehow are so influenced by the propaganda that misrepresentation of our history is there. That is a gross. You are victimizing us all over again. You have to tell the story of Bangladesh from our point of view. How we suffered in ground, only we know. What happened then, how hard we are trying, what a credit it is to Sheikh Hasina, our honorable Prime Minister, just to keep this country on a secular path. How much risk she has taken on her life to try our war criminals. Nobody wanted that. You've heard the phones she received from all across the globe. As if America, the terrorists in America are Islamic terrorists, but our terrorists are Muslim clerics. That's what Pakistan would want you to believe. But you need to talk about, genocide cannot be partial. When you talk about genocide, you cannot be partial. It has to be fair, no matter what the religion is, no matter what the nationality is, what the color is, not who the perpetrator is. So whoever the perpetrator, point that out, and that perpetrator must be brought to justice, wherever it is happening. Why? Why do we need to think back about 50 years back event in Bangladesh? Who cares? Otherwise, Baluchistan will happen. After that, some part very near to you. We have to teach the future generations what is right and what is wrong, what is crime and what is humanity, what is genocide and what is a common fellow feeling of humanity, human being. Let us rise above our cultural and our religious boundaries. I agree with Bob Blackman. No religion is at fault. If you point your finger to any religion, what you're doing is you are alienating the friends within the religion. All actually deeply religious people should be very humane, very peace-loving. And that's something that all religion says. Do not believe those who misrepresent their religion. That is not the true Islam. That is not true Buddhism. They are doing the same with Rohingyas. No. That is, violence is not the face of Hinduism. No. Religion promotes love and peace. It is we who distort the text. We take it out of the context and use it for our benefit. Remember, Pakistan was Muslim. They killed a Muslim majority East Pakistanis. So it's not the religion, but it is the greed, the criminality of the perpetrators. Let us pinpoint what the actual fault is. Let us not blame religion. Let us not blame a certain people. Let us blame when it comes to Bangladesh genocide, blame Pakistani generals, Pakistani army and their collaborators, Al-Badr Jamaat. When it comes to Rohingya, blame the Myanmar and their armies and their generals. Proper identification of the perpetrator and bringing them to justice will only ensure that genocide will not happen somewhere else again. As long as the perpetrators go free, there will be, after East Pakistan, Baluchistan, and there will be one after the another. Even now, some of our children will be perpetrators because they will not know any better, because we never stood up. We were bogged down by our bigotry, our partiality, and we never stood up. Let us form a global alliance of free thinkers and not blame each other, but blame only the perpetrator. Let us, from Bangladesh, I would like to say, please work to get our genocide recognized, and please help us please support us internationally when we are trying our war criminals. We will also try the generals of Pakistan. We want Pakistan to apologize to us. We want the share of the treasure, the money that was due to us. But at the same time, we want that every child in the world will know our history, so that never again a genocide like ours happens, and never again a victim's daughter has to stand in front of you and correct your mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nuzhat Chaudhary. And I'm sure everybody sitting in the hall is sharing your pain and grief. And when we listen something directly from a victim of a genocide, it makes the whole difference. So next, I'd like to invite a renowned journalist and author, Mr. Francois Gautier to share his ideas with all of us. Sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. See, most of us live life through second-hand opinions. Either it is the opinions of our parents, of our teachers, what we read in the papers. Very few of us have the privilege to experience first-hand things. Well, as a journalist, as a young man in love with India, my eyes were opened in Kashmir because I had the same misconceptions, I had the same prejudices, I have the same ignorance that most people have, at least in my country, and also I believe many people in India too. But when I covered Kashmir as a journalist, my eyes were opened, you know. And I have never forgotten, I know that many of my co-panelists will disagree with me, but what I saw in Kashmir was that a religion in the name of its God, which is omnipotent and the only true one, can shut out brothers and sisters with whom they lived more or less in harmony for centuries in the name of that one and only true God. You know, the beautiful thing about Hindus is that, I'm married to a Hindu, by the way, she's half Hindu and half Sikh, is that they can accept that God manifests as he or she, that he can come at different times, you know, during the entire history of humanity with different names, having different scriptures, you know, so it could be Muhammad, it could be Krishna, it could be Jesus, could be Zarathustra. So Hindu accepts that. You know, my wife, when she goes to Paris, and my father is a staunch Catholic, she can go to church. She doesn't feel she's committing a sin. But I see today the new converted Christians, Indian, I'm talking about India, the newly converted Christians, they are more radical, they are more fanatic than the Christians were 200 years ago in my country, France. So when people say, you know, that the genocide has no religion, I tend to disagree, because what I saw in Kashmir and what I saw elsewhere also, because I covered the whole of South Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, you know, is that there are two religions that say, my God is the only true one. You know, either, you know, I kill you maybe to convert you, or, you know, I use millions of dollars to convert you to the true faith, to the true God. And this is still true. This is a genocide. You know, there might have been physical genocide, but the genocide that is happening today towards the Hindus, you know, is still very much there. It may be done, you know, with dollars, or it may be done, you know, with love, what they call love jihad, but it's still happening today. You know. So I'm talking out of experience. I'm not saying, oh, I read it in the paper, or my father said. I come from a Catholic family. You know, I'm a non-Indian, non-Hindu. Whatever ideas I got them on the ground here in India. I met them on the ground, you know, seeing people. I made my own judgments. I made my own conclusions. The genocide of the Hindus is the greatest genocide ever in the entire history of humanity. There is no doubt about that. You know, there's absolutely no doubt, because after Kashmir, of course, after what I saw in Kashmir, I started studying Indian history, you know, the real Indian history, not the one that is taught in the schools, Indian schools today, you know. And people like Aurangzeb and Tipu Sultan, what they have done to Hindus in the name of that one true only God is amazing. You know. It's amazing. It's a genocide that runs it, you know. People have said 100 million Hindus died from the Hindu Kush till Mumbai 2011. Most probably true, most probably true. On the Hindu Kush itself, you know, 1 million Hindus, I mean, even the Encyclopedia Britannica admits it. You know, 1 million Hindus died on the Hindu Kush, you know, taken as slaves, out of cold. Now, you know, when you perceive truth, sometimes you go against the current. You go against what is politically correct. I remember, you know, when I was covering Kashmir, Say from 87 till 2000, every foreign journalist was in Srinagar in those days. There was only one hotel which was open. It was called the Ajaat Hotel. It was on the bank of the Jhelum River. So all of us were in Kashmir. But in those days, everybody used to say, the Indian government is lying. Pakistan is not sponsoring terrorism in Kashmir. Mark Talley, who is a very respected man and no doubt a very nice man also, was a leader of that sort. Rubbish. Pakistan is not sponsoring. Pakistan is not arming. Pakistan is not taking, these militants beyond the border and training them and sending them back with weapons. And everybody said, yes, the Hindustan Times, the Times of India, everybody, everybody said, yeah, of course, Mark Talley cannot be wrong. But I knew it was true. It could not be possible otherwise. I saw the first killing, of the Hindu leaders of the Kashmiri Pandit community. I was there. Some of them I had interviewed. I saw them killed. I saw Hindus fleeing, in 3-4 months, 350,000 Hindus fleeing their homeland, leaving their houses, leaving their ancestral land, becoming refugees in their own country. It is an ethnic cleansing. Now, I don't know about, Bangladesh. I was too young for at that time, but it's too easy always to accuse Pakistan. I know myself, I have defended the fact that Pakistan, mostly out of vengeance for having lost Bangladesh, because they felt that the loss of Bangladesh was due to Indira Gandhi, to India, they took revenge on two fronts. One was Khalistan, and fortunately, we see that the Khalistan movement is again raising its ugly head. And the other one was Kashmir. That was their revenge on India. There is no doubt about that. But as I said, the Christian converts, the new ones, are the most fanatic. You don't have to be, a descendant of the Iranians, of the Turks who invaded India to be a fanatic. The converts are the most fanatics. The Hindus that were converted to Islam have become the most fanatic. I remember traveling. In those days, there was only Indian Airlines, so the flight from Srinagar to Delhi used to stop in Jammu very often. So I remember traveling once. There was a Kashmiri Muslim lady next to me, and I told her she was a journalist, so she supposed, Kashmiris suppose that all Western journalists are friendly to their cause. So she talked to me freely, and I asked her, because she came out saying that she felt close to the militants. So I said, why? She said, we feel closer to Islam than we feel to India. First we feel that we're Muslims, and then maybe we are Indians. And this is a universal, every government from the Congress to the BJP that thinks that pouring billions of rupees into the valley of Kashmir will convert Kashmiris to India, they're wrong. Because the first allegiance is to Islam. One has to respect that also. I traveled, when I came to India first, I traveled by car from Paris to Delhi, and my best friend was a French Moroccan Muslim. He died, a very nice man. And every Muslim country we crossed, he would say Salam Alaikum, and people would open their houses to us, they would feed us, they would house us, they would give us a shilam. So there is a brotherhood in Islam which doesn't exist among Hindus. You go to New York and there are millions of Hindus in America, and you say Hari Om to one of them, they look to you as if you're crazy. So I have respect for Islam, but at the same time, I know that the greatest genocide is that of the Hindus. And if you talk about genocide and you want to generalize it, yes, of course, 6 million Jews were killed by Hitler. The Armenians' genocide was also enormous. There are genocides happening today in Africa, in Sudan. Mostly they are Muslim killing Christians. Mostly this is, the press won't say that because the media is politically correct. Mostly it's like that. So if you want to say the truth today, it is difficult because even now under the BJP government, it's difficult to say. I think Mr. Modi is trying to placate everybody, and that he's the prime minister of all Indians, including the Muslims and the Christians and the Parsis and the Sikhs. But truth is truth, truth is truth. If you speak about the genocide, you have to speak about genocide of Hindus, and I was lucky that I witnessed it in Kashmir, and I never forgot it. Maybe if I had not been to Kashmir, I would be like all these Western journalists that here today that travel from one five-star hotel to another five-star hotel, one country, in 3-4 days they have understood everything. But it's not possible. India is a very ancient, very complicated country, very vast country. So unless you meet the people, travel, experience firsthand, then you're ignorant and you remain ignorant and you keep your readers and your viewers ignorant. When Mr. Modi removed Article 370, even many Indians don't know what Article 370 is. It meant that Kashmiris could go to any part of India, buy land, start a business, build a house, but Indians could not do the same in Kashmir. So as a result, the Kashmiri of the valley, Kashmiri Muslims, today they dominate the souvenir trade in India. If you look at the souvenir trade from Delhi, Pune, Chennai, even Pondicherry, many of these people are Kashmiri Muslims, and because they're good at business, and so they dominate the souvenir trade. But Indians could not do that. And so actually Mr. Modi set a wrong right. So that if you're an Indian, you can go to any part of the country and start a business. India is one country. But the way it was reported in the West, in the media, was that this was a persecution of the Muslims, that the Muslims were persecuted. No, a journalist, a good journalist, does some background work, and explains, the entire picture. You have Ladakh, which is predominantly Buddhist, and you have Jammu, which still has a majority of Hindus, and then you have the Valley of Kashmir, where there were 1 million Hindus in 1900, and today there may be, 20 or 25 left. The Valley of Kashmir, which is today 99% Muslims. So I'm a good journalist, so I explained that. Then I explained that what was Article 370, that, Muslims could go to any part of India, and they did indeed, but the rest of India could not go to Kashmir, especially to the Valley of Kashmir, which remains a very dangerous place, which was when I was covering it, and remains today a very dangerous place. But this work was not done, and as a result, in my country, France, it is perceived that the removal of Article 370 by Mr. Modi was an act of persecution. Now, the other thing that makes me angry, because I'm a passionate journalist, is that today the Kashmiri Muslims portraying themselves as victims. Because I saw them starting this war in the name of Islam against the Indian government and the Indian army. They were the one who fired the first shots. In those days it was the GLKF. They're the one who kidnapped, they're the one who killed, they're the one who strangled, they're the one who raped. They started the war. They started the war against an elected government, a democratic government. And today they're portraying themselves as victims. This is, people have a very short memory, of course, and if you're young, you don't know, so you say, oh yeah, maybe. But the truth is, again, the truth is the truth. They started a war in the name of that one only God against an elected government. And today they're saying, oh look, we are victims, we don't have internet, we don't have... Come on, man, come on, Unfortunately, I mean, I love Hindus and I keep defending them, but unfortunately, Hindus are very divided lot, they're very tamasic, they're very selfish, there are 10 million people in Delhi. How many have come today to that conference, which is so important, Thanks to Ajaat for, persevering in spite of so many hurdles. It is so important. Will the Kashmiri Pandits return to Kashmir? I doubt it very much, unless Pakistan and India come together. This is what Sri Aurobindo said in 1947. I know that many Hindus fear that, but as long as Pakistan and India are divided, the strife and problems will curse this country. You know? So unless there's a kind of, European, like the European market, like the European Union, there's a kind of South Asia Union that comes up somehow, and borders are diminished and there's a common currency, and so then the Kashmir problem will get resolved, I think. But as long as that doesn't happen, you can pour billions and billions and rupees into the valley of Kashmir, but the feeling will remain that my first allegiance is to Islam. My first allegiance is to Islam. Even the moderator, this lady was a very nice lady, She was taking her daughter to a convent in Jammu. She was a very nice lady. She was not a, fanatic. My first allegiance is to Islam. This problem is insolvable. You cannot solve this problem. So we come to this one world family, We need to accept each other. Islam needs to recognize that, I remain a true Muslim. I remain faithful to my religion, to my creed. But I accept that my neighbor may worship another God. When this happens, then also there is hope, there is light. But at the moment, I don't see it happening. The same is true of Christianity. Though in the West, I think, my family is Christian, so I can see that they come to India, they can come to a temple, they're accepting, But still, the Christianity has a strong belief is that ours is the only true God. We need to convert you. We need to convert you. And for that, we will pour millions. I mean, I live partly in Tamil Nadu, and I see, the statistics say there are 3-4% Christians, but at least 15% Christians in India today. Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh. So the conversion are happening, with billions of dollars. I give you free medical, I give you free schooling, I give you a free loan. This is also a genocide because the culture gets affected. And then they tell you, you cannot wear a putu, you cannot do puja, it's a sin. You cannot enter a Hindu temple, it's a sin. It's also a cultural genocide. So genocide is a very vast subject. It's a bit sad that there are so few of you today. I believe that in this world today, India holds the knowledge that is necessary for the world to survive. The world cannot survive without knowledge that India holds. Why am I born? Why do I die? What happens? Why am I reborn again? What is Dharma? What is Karma? What is Anavatar? As I said, how God manifests herself or himself at different times using different names, This is a very precious knowledge that once roamed upon the world, from Greece to Egypt to Mesopotamia, people knew. But now, the world has been taken over by monotheism, by the thing that I am the only one who holds the truth. And I need to convert you when necessary, by killing myself, by sacrificing myself, So it's very important that this knowledge is defended. And it's under attack everywhere. So the genocide is something that we all need to fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really wonderful, and you gave some very good insights based on your on-field experience. Now, I request Dr. Ajay Chrungoo, Chairman Panellists Kashmir, to present his views.
Distinguished panelists on the stage, brothers and sisters, this commemoration is being held only some days after the Hindus of Kashmir commemorated the Kashmiri Hindu Holocaust Day on 19 January. I have to give you two personal instances as a victim about the occasion, because that would help me and perhaps you also to understand certain intricacies of the issue which we are face to face with. On 19th January, correlating at how many places the mosques in Kashmir declared almost the verdict of expulsion of Hindus. And on an average, how many people were present in those mosques? The rough correlation, the rough collection of this data gives us an estimate of around 1.5 million people on the roads, almost all of them males. Say 40-45% of the male population of Kashmir. Whole localities bereft of their Muslim male population, and primarily all the houses having only the Muslim ladies inside them. And during that night, not a single theft took place, and at least has been reported. Not a single harassment, molestation of the women folk who were alone in the houses, Muslim women folk alone in the houses till late night. Bashir Assad said that there was some social sanction. I'm so happy that he has said it. Of course, I do disagree that there was not some social sanction. There was a wider societal sanction. And if we do not recognize this fact, then we will not be able to change the situation on the ground. Then we will not be recognizing the fact how this ideology of exclusion, expulsion, and genocide has taken the grip of the society, and to what extent. If we do not recognize this fact, then we will not be having policies to really counter it. There is a wider societal sanction. The second thing, which is just related to it, is that I was working in Institute of Medical Sciences, Sobra. I was for 2 days in the hospital in those tough times, for 2 nights, and that day, after the lunch, I came home. I didn't have lunch in hospital. I came home at 3 or 4 o'clock. I had my lunch at my home and went to sleep. Around 10:30, 11 in the night, I'm just hearing the whispers of my parents, my sisters, and some neighbor coming. I'm half asleep, and the moment I hear the whispers, I just try to find out what it is, and the neighbor is trying to tell them that you just tell your girls to put on their shoes, put on their clothes, we might have to run away. The moment it sank into my mind, I suddenly got up, the sleep disappeared, and I suddenly started seeing that something catastrophic is happening. I went out, found the neighbor who was a Hindu with a small axe in his hand, wearing a farran. Inside the farran, he was wearing a jacket. Then he had gola shoes, and he was just preparing to run away and telling us that you be prepared to run away. Those 5 to 10 minutes, they are the moments of death immersion. We're just confronted by death. What is going to happen the next moment? The voices, the screams, the threats were coming from all over, and they were being blared on the microphones of the mosques. So we're deciding if we go this way, will we reach the nearest security picket within this time? And if they come from this side, where will we go? Almost everywhere, the Hindus of Kashmir had the same specter. The killings, selective killings that Hindus had started earlier. Killing one and scaring 10 process had already started. But why was 19 January the Holocaust Day? Was because on that day, there was a societal sanction of the genocide. And societal sanction of the genocide happens. It cannot be trivialized. If we trivialize it, we write our own death warrant. The second thing which I want to say today is that we are face to face with a 1,000-year-old, long protracted genocidal war on the civilization of India. I'm not talking about religion. This war has not abated. What happened in 47 was the continuation of this war. What happened in Pak-occupied Jammu Kashmir in 47 was the continuation of the same war. What happened in Bangladesh, or at that time the East Pakistan, was the continuation of the same war. What happened to the Muslims who fought it, who stood up for democracy, secularism, was the continuation of the same war. What is happening with the people of Balochistan is the continuation of the same, all Muslims. Very few Hindus there. It is the continuation of the same war. And what happened to the Hindus of Jammu and Kashmir, particularly the Hindus of Kashmir who were pushed out of, who had to run away, it is the continuation of the same war. The point is not how many people supported this war. The point is a mindset remained, a mindset which captured the states, used the state power and military power to destroy people, and to destroy people in millions. Unless we internalize this fact, we will not be able to stand up as a nation. And if we do not, if we ignore it, if we trivialize it, I'll give you one more incident which is very relevant to the issues I'm discussing. My friend, a Muslim doctor, I asked him, just before I left, I ran away from Kashmir, I asked him, are you going to kill Hindus? He told me that no, it's not a communal struggle. Then he told me, but if something like that is decided, I will let you know beforehand. Okay. He was honest. Because the day I decided to leave, I was in the hospital. I went to the hospital in the morning. And the moment I entered, I was working in the oncology ward at that time as a junior resident. There were two nurses there who told me, Dr. Saab, aap chale jao, you leave. Somebody is searching for you. They're not good people, and your life is in danger. I found 3 young men wearing the fairan, just walking the corridor, and they told me that they are there. And I could see behind the fairan, behind the gown, I could see the nozzles of Kalashnikov just coming, protruding out. I am not sure what should I do. Should I run that way, or should I run some other way? I felt a little safe in the sanctuary of the ward, and I hope that they would not enter the ward, because most of the patients in the ward were Muslims. They would not like to scare them out. So there was a doctor's lift through which I went down, that just entered into the ward itself. They ran away because they could not get the main lift there, so they ran down the staircases. I reached the ground, baffled, without not able to think how I can survive. There was a bank counter in the corridor. I went to the bank counter. There's a line for the pay of the employees of the... So I, in that small time, could realize that if I remain in that line, they might not come, because there are many people, again, most of them Muslims, and they would hit me. They would not hit me this time. they would avoid this. This judgment was perhaps correct, because the moment they saw me entering into that row, they found that I was not running away from them. I was going just to collect my pay, and I stayed there, and they were just doing up and down the corridor. The moment they went back, and I was a blind spot for them for some time, I ran away. Now, that very day, when I reached home, my mother told me that I told her that this is going to happen, so I went away with my small suitcase to my uncle's home in a cantonment area, Indira Nagar. And that very point, we decided that I will leave. The decision was that my Poofi, the sister of my father, I was told that you carry them also along with. My grandmother and my Poofi, you carry them along with. So I went to Indira Nagar, which was a cantonment area. That very next day, my doctor friend had come to my house. My mother told me on the phone that he had come, and he had come to carry you away. He had come in the morning and told my mother that there is a problem. Ajay's life is in danger. I will carry him and drop him at Jammu. Fine, I was so happy that at least he had fulfilled his promise. And I left next day to Jammu, ran away along with my Poofi, and my grandmother. After some time, I met that friend. He told me, okay, fine, you are talking about Pan Kashmir now. This will give you some political sense. And please don't demonize the Muslims. I said, I'm not demonizing them. I'm speaking a reality which is going to be very critical. And he told me that his father was abducted by the terrorists a few times. Even then, he was worried about the demonizing. He was worried about somebody speaking about what was happening in Kashmir. Now, once we face this reality, we are face to face with a situation where an undiluted truth has to be said. Victims cannot afford to say a falsehood. Because then you don't nourish civilization. It's victims who nourish the civilization. The malaise of genocide that has afflicted Jammu and Kashmir is the malaise of genocide that afflicted the leadership of this country. Agreeing to partition of India was agreeing to unleash a genocide. There was nothing else. How could anybody tell me that they said that yes, we'll partition India and there'll be no genocide? You don't need a rocket science brain. How could we say that for a political power sharing we can unleash genocide? How can you say that Jinnah was a secular man? How can you say that Jinnah, who wanted to dissect this nation, dissect this civilization, did it because he had been insulted by the top leadership of Congress? They did not accommodate him. And that forced him to think of tearing apart a civilization. How can you give a secular certificate to Jinnah? How can you spare Nehru? How can you spare him? How can you spare Gandhi? Even how can you spare Sardar Patel? Imagine, they were all knowing that disturbances are all going on all over the country. They were all knowing direct action plan was in operation. They were all knowing that every day hundreds are being killed. How could they pretend normal? And when on June 4th, 1947, Mountbatten here and Attlee in United Kingdom declared the partition plan, they asked Nehru and Nehru and Jinnah to endorse it. But they insisted that Baldev Singh should also endorse it. And this is the reality which we are face to face with even now. So the people who heard that speech, they said that in the Jinnah's voice there was muffled joy. In the Jawaharlal Nehru's voice, there was an uneasy conscience. And then they say about Baldev Singh, there was nothing of this. He was speaking as if everything was hunky-dory. Then people say that Jinnah and Nehru knew about Punjab the same way the Chamberlain knew about Czechoslovakia. But what happened to Baldev Singh? Didn't he know what will happen to Punjab? What will happen to Sikhs? These days, sometimes I feel it. Why does it happen? That something is being forgotten so early, so easily. Why does it happen? And the moment you address this question, you realize that cruelty, limitless cruelty, is not enough to ultimately trounce the baser political interests which you have. Forget that and again embrace the same process of genocide. That's why experts say if genocide is ignored, it duplicates. It has been replicating since that time. Pakistan is a genocidal state. It was created through the process of genocide. And the leadership of India across the line, they consented in unleashing a genocide on this civilization. They cannot be excused for it. And if we excuse them, we will be guaranteeing the next genocide. If we forget what has been happening, we will be guaranteeing many genocides in the coming years on the nation, on the people of this subcontinent. Kashmiri Hindu genocide presents a different picture. As Dr. Nuzhat said, millions of people killed in Bangladesh. And we have not been touched. Millions of people killed on the other side also, or converted on the other side, we have not been touched. The world has not been touched. Armenian Christian genocide was far more gruesome, and they still are not being recognized. Even the Israel is not ready to recognize their genocide. This is the ruthlessness and grimness of the situation. Now, 1981 census put us as 140,000 people living within the Muslim population of Kashmir. The moment we were thrown out, our figures started coming up, swelling up to more than 400,000 people. Why did it happen? Okay, manipulated census figures, or maybe people reluctant, people thinking that even registering for a census is not a big deal, it's not an important thing. And our estimates at that time, whatever we correlated, it was around 1,200 people being killed. Small number to the millions. Sometimes killing small numbers can create a far more comprehensive genocide if the population masses are very less. Such a gruesome tragedy unleashed in Bangladesh. But still there is a population mass fighting it and asking for justice and asking the people to be now brought in front of the justice. In Kashmir, that choice was not there. The moment we left, the genocidal assault was on the empty houses and the empty temples. That is the most grim aspect of the genocidal war unleashed in the valley. Wherever Kashmiri Hindu houses were in clusters, they were burnt. Wherever they were not in clusters, in one or two, they were either dismantled brick by brick, taking out the construction material. You see, the most important thing in a house, there was a wooden beam. They were not concrete beams. And they would just cut through a saw the topmost beam so that the floor, the roof collapses. And it will take just one season of snowfall to make the house to crumble down. And the capturing, encroachment of the houses, entering into the houses and living there. Government had to ultimately enact a Distress Sales Act. Because the people who were living in exile, they would see that even if we sell these houses for crumbs, we'll get still some money. Maybe to build a small room, maybe to build a few rooms. And in this entire process, the state of India, it remained as a bystander. Why does it happen? After repeated genocides, what does it happen? All of us are face to face with two realities. And we people who are now committed, and I fully endorse this argument, that this proposal, that we have to create an alliance of the victims first, who know that their problem is the same, who know that the same things happen, whatever the reason, the religious reason, the political reason, the racist reason, or anything else. But the damage inflicted on the people is the same. The damage inflicted on the civilization is the same. I endorsed this proposal. And it is in my mind, the moment I look at the situation, I feel that on one side, there's a genocidal process in this subcontinent which Pakistan represents. Pakistan is not just the epicenter of terrorism. Pakistan is the epicenter of genocide. Unless the people of the civilization of India, what is known as India, they stand up and say that we have to put a halt on it. This nation, this whole humanity living in this continent, in this geographical area is not going to survive. We are caught up between genocide and denial of genocide. We don't have to fight only genocide, we have to fight denial of genocide. And denial of genocide is the climax of genocide. It is the hounding out of the victim once more, killing him once more. We cannot allow it. So any process which visualizes a response to genocide, at least in the subcontinental context, they have to keep in mind two monumental processes. The genocidal process, which the very nature of Pakistan unleashes, and the denial of genocide, which is happening, unfortunately, on the Indian side. Why does it happen? Why is Indian state, why is the Indian political class ignoring it? For 70 years, Indian academia, Indian political class thought that forgetting history will ultimately eliminate the distrust which the history sometimes creates, and it will lead to reconciliation. There are arguments which are being sold to us that you don't need reversal of genocide. You don't need justice of genocide for the genocide. You need restorative justice. You need a reconciliation with the perpetrator. And the moment, at the highest level, the government, at the highest level, the political class tells you that you need reconciliation with the perpetrator. Now, in this whole situation, I want to tell you one thing, and then close my. The reconciliation with the entire genocidal process of the people who have not suffered it is basically the inability to come to terms with a situation of death. They are escapists. They want to escape. And more than escapists also, they're criminals also. They want to condone death. And that's happening on this side, and we cannot allow this to happen. We who are the victims of genocide, if we commit this mistake that we will condone the perpetrator, we'll be destroying the civilization, we'll be destroying the humanity. So there is a bigger goal. For the first time, it appears that small spaces are getting created in the state of India. The previous stranglehold has been dismantled, and now alternative voices are coming up. This type of a gathering should have taken place long back. We should have been cooperating, collaborating with each other long back. It didn't happen because there was a stranglehold. And this stranglehold, the nature and viciousness of this stranglehold has to be understood. You see, we can understand in China, during the communist, that ultimately ascendance, the march of these communists and capturing the power, people said people conformed. And the reality was there's cultural purges in Pakistan, in China. Millions of people being killed or threatened. In Soviet Union, people say that people conformed. Again, we know there is millions of people being killed. They are sent to gulags. But in India, what happened? For 70 years, we conformed without the gun behind our neck. What has happened to us? And that process of conformity is still happening. And this process of conformity will break if we start speaking the truth. If we start acting in cohesion, if we start, it's nothing to do with religion, but if wherever it has something to do with religion, would we go back, take a step back? So, creating a society, created a civilization based on pluralism and right to equality. It's a wonderful slogan. But then marching through the landmines of intolerance, the traps, the ensnares, the secular snares which catch you up, catch you in the name of telling you that you are also becoming communal, you are also becoming intolerant. That is a psychological trap which has to be avoided, which has to be ultimately defeated. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. It was really stimulating, and as usual, you presented your views with a lot of force, commitment. And yes, you're right, unless and until the whole world works in unison, in collaboration, we cannot fight such genocides, and we cannot fight the possibility of such genocides in future. So whatever happened has happened, but at the same time, we need to work for, like Dr. Nuzhat Chaudhary said, we need to bring such people to justice. And at the same time, we have to see our future also. So, ladies and gentlemen, so now it is time for a question and answer session. The rule is very simple. Means you can ask questions, specific questions to the panelists. And at the same time, if you like, you can have your observations, but in brief. So I request our volunteers to pass on the mics. Please, you can raise your hands, and then with a brief introduction, you can ask your question or your observation. Sure, sir.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am Brigadier Dr. Vijay Sagar Diban, hardcore Jammuite Dogra. Here in Pakistani army, When they wanted to unleash a genocide, it was not just that they decided, okay, we have to pick up A, B, C, D. No, there was something called Peace Committee. Peace Committee was an organization which went into each and every taluka, every village of Bangladesh. And they identified whether Hindu or Muslim, who was to be picked up and neutralized. That was the first thing. Secondly, for doing this, after Peace Committee was a civilian organization. After that, they went into raise an organization called Razakars, who were actually doing it. So how are we going to get these perpetrators to justice? Where is the forum? And which forum? And what teeth will it have? I think
Can I answer that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I
ma'am,
think, so one of the things has been hinted at by Dr. Ajay Chrungoo is that we never had a consensus in this country to recognize crimes against our own citizens, and this habit of trying to cover up what has happened, say that you should forget, move on, adjust, and so on. This malaise has gone very deep. Now, in the context of Kashmir, I would like to tell you that at the height of this insurgency, even the exodus had taken place, and some years later, there were 4 Air Force officers standing on the road waiting for the vehicle to pick them up and take them to the camp or their station, wherever, and they were gunned down in plain sight. The culprit was known, but we had a government here which decided that they must be brought into the mainstream. And here in the India International Center, very, very dubious characters would be escorted in like honorable guests and be given tea and things in. And I was almost shocked. I almost collapsed, but I was sitting in the lounge when I saw those kind of people sitting there. Then that man went through a prolonged honeymoon with our government and our own civil society people, the elites. And now, after he has fallen out with him, there is talk that why should we not at least fix him? Now, if that is the mindset with which a government or a society works, people like us were maligned and sidelined because we are communal, we are whatever, we are marginal, doesn't matter. But this is something, the introspection on this issue has to go very deep.
Can I just address Bangladesh part? It's a big history. In my short, quite long speech, I couldn't cover everything, but I did talk about Jamaat, who is all those Al-Badrs, Al-Shams, and Rajakars. They were called auxiliary forces, and they are the ones who took my fathers and intellectuals. You know, intellectual killing that happened. They were the auxiliary forces. They picked them up. How did the Pakistani army knew the addresses of our fathers, or so on and so forth? No question about it. But who were the auxiliary force of? The Pakistani army. Al-Badr was formed, sitting with General Rao Farman Ali. And the name of the intellectuals were formed by Rao Farman Ali and these auxiliary forces. There was a diary that was seized by Indian Army after his office was taken over. There was a diary and my father's name was also there. So I know that there are auxiliary forces, we are trying them. What I'm saying is that also we need to try the Pakistani army, because auxiliary force or the planners or the main army, everybody is equally to be blamed. And killing is a killing. So Pakistani generals have to be, whoever, all those war criminals have to be brought to justice. We are bringing our collaborators, Bangladeshi collaborators, Bengali collaborators to justice. Now it's time to bring the organizations like Jamaat to justice and Pakistani war criminals to justice.
Please, sir. Next.
Good evening, everybody. I am Shailendra from Jammu, and I'm very happy that I participated and was present here in today's, this commemoration of the Holocaust, 76th Holocaust Day. The panelists have suggested some very good things. One among them being that kind of a collaboration we can have to punish the perpetrators of genocide. But I have a question to all of you. Do we have a system or the laws in India that address the genocide, act of genocide? My knowledge goes that we do not have a law supporting this. So without a law, ma'am, please wait. Without a law, are you going to work for that law?
Okay.
Are you people committed that the government of India enacts that law? First thing comes from there. That is my submission to all of you, that commits yourselves to creating a law in India. Let the Indian Parliament pass a law where the crime of genocide is recognized, and then a system of bringing it to justice is brought in. That is one thing. My second question was again to Francois. Since he is not here, but he brought in a very, very bizarre kind of a, analogy by saying that Kashmir problem can be solved only if Pakistan and India are brought together to do something about it. Now, Pakistan, which is primarily the cause of genocide in this entire continent, in this subcontinent, how can you expect Pakistan to be part of a process which addresses genocide? I wanted to ask him, but he's not here. Okay.
Well, your points well taken, sir, and we'll certainly convey it to the panelists, and certainly you will get the answer. Anybody else, please?
Hello.
Just
Let him answer. I also want to say one
Okay,
line.
you want to respond? Fine.
we know it very well that when the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide was the convention was drafted in United Nations. India was one of the pioneers of that convention, and amongst the first nations who signed it. Then in 1958, I think, the Indian Parliament ratified it. Now, in the context of what Pakistan has been doing, it is very critical that Indian state should have a commitment ultimately to stand up to it. They have not as yet owned the genocide. They have to own the genocides, even genocides happening on the other side of the territory, because India is responsible for it. And the analogy is that around 23% of the population of, at that time, the Pakistan, East Pakistan and West Pakistan, it was non-Muslim. And Indian leadership was very, very inconvenient when the people from that place will come and relate their stories, and they would tell them that you stopped relating the stories, it is creating problems on this side. Somehow they wanted the things to settle on this side. Okay, even if we give them the benefit of doubt, they wanted somehow to peace to descend, at least on this side. They entered into a very bizarre sort of a relationship with Liaquat, and told him that your minorities living in your country will be a guarantee to the security of minorities living on this side. It was a scathing statement of indictment about the people who were still accepting that that the partitioning of the country on the basis of religion was not at all correct. And India was going to become a secular country based on right to equality. The concept of hostages could not have been enforced yet by law, because everybody was an equal citizen. But by implications, those who were left on that side, they were declared hostages. They were just hostages for them. They knew it. In India, the Muslims have the law to defend them. And they knew it very well on that side. The non-Muslims do not have the law to defend them. So virtually, they were handed over to the proselytizing apparatus there. So it's very critical. What is happening in Pakistan, I can say even it's very critical what is happening, what has been happening in Bangladesh. It's now a good thing that for some years now we are seeing a change, a definite positive revolutionary change taking place in Bangladesh. Indian state has to commit itself to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. We have in our own humble way tried to give them the bill. We don't say it is the final, we don't say we are the experts in it. There are far better experts in India, perhaps too. But the commitment of the state of India to prevent and punish the crimes of genocide on the territory of India and even in the immediate neighborhood of India, because all the people there, they have been part of India. They cannot close their eyes. So this has been taken up, and we think that this can be one of the ways of doing it. But again, it starts first, do they recognize that they have the responsibility to prevent the genocide? I think even now, Indian leadership still wants to avoid it. They want to close their eyes to what is happening around. They had a responsibility of preventing genocide in Bangladesh. They had a responsibility of preventing genocide in East Pakistan, West Pakistan. And they had a responsibility of preventing a genocide on this side. If Indian state cannot prevent and punish the crime of genocide on its own territory, then it cannot help any people anywhere in the world.
All right. Anybody else?
Just one statement I wanted to add
Yeah.
to you, sir. Wherever in the world genocide has been punished, wherever, in whichever incidents, the actual crime is broken down into incidents. And those, therefore, we can always address the specific incidents. Like I mentioned, the shooting of airmen. There's Vandhama, there are so many cases, there's Tikalal Tablu, there are so many cases, individual cases, and those cases are tried. And when it becomes enough of a corpus, then you can say the genocide crime is addressed. But the crimes, in their micro form, can and should be addressed. We need not go into the larger dialogue because we know we have lived in a country which has wanted the leadership, which went for partition, wanted to avoid dealing with the consequences. In West Pakistan side, because the border was so close to Delhi, you couldn't avoid the refugees and they're being visible to the rest of the country. In East Pakistan, what happened when the refugees came, we always wanted to ignore them. They came to Tripura and Bengal even in 47. They came after that also. It is just that they quietly adjusted themselves locally. Government of India did nothing for them. And I think Bangladesh today, I'm sorry to say, is in a very precarious state. Sheikh Hasina has done what she has done within her limitations. I feel India could have helped her covertly. Secular bloggers and people who think nice, think in a modern way, they are butchered, they are hacked to death to give a message to the rest of the people. Nobody has been able to tackle that aspect. So we should not be complacent about things being hunky-dory in Bangladesh. They are very, very on the edge, I feel. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Hi, this is Mafruza Sultana, research scholar at South Asian University in International Law. My question is a bit different from discussion maybe. In 1995, India has agreed an MOU with International Committee for Red Crescent and Red Crescent. So that allows ICRC to access the detainees of the prevailing situation of Jammu and Kashmir. But from 2017, India government didn't give permission to ICRC to access those detainees. So a few articles have been published that says this MOU that there is a condition for ICRC, they have to maintain the confidentiality. We know how ICRC works. So from 2017, India government didn't give permission to access those detainees. So my question is from the journalist that is there anything really confidential that scholars are good, the ICRC can publish even the previous records, or there is nothing confidential in Jammu and Kashmir situation? So that's why India did not give permission to the ICRC.
Ma'am, we are not representing the government of India, so we can't.
No. As a journalist, so I don't know I don't have any evidence in the situation.
You should listen the answer. We are not representing government of India. We are an NGO. We are working for prevention of genocides, and we have been highlighting the issues. And in Jammu and Kashmir, even if the separatist Bar Association of Kashmir, they are visiting each and every jail of Jammu and Kashmir, know the position of the detainees. I don't think government of India will be having any objection to IRC visiting jails.
No.
And we are not representing government of India. That's
No, this is public information from 2017 to 19. They didn't give permission.
But we are not supposed to give answers for the government of India. We are not government spokesperson.
Yeah.
We are impressing upon the government of India that you should enact a law for prevention of genocide. So we are also asking government of India. We are not a government spokesperson.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Sir, I'm from South Asian University and pursuing Masters in Economics. So, sir, my question is, so like any other being, my opinions are constructed and it has never been a first-hand experience. So I'm from Bangladesh, but I've been in India for past 12 years. And in each side of the part of these countries, opinions have been differing a lot. So it has been quite a difficulty for me to come to a conclusion or make any judgment about whatever historic scenario that has happened before me. So if I assume that you are the bearer of, suppose, highlighting the issue of genocide and whatever had happened in the history, so what role do you expect from me as a youth where I do not have any first-hand experience? So am I supposed to grow hatred or expect justice from a generation, like same generation as mine, who has not been a part of the history? I'm lost. So what is the message for you to youths like me?
Okay. You please. He should remember.
The tragedy of Bangladesh history is that after the killing of Bangabandhu, only 3.5 years later, those elements, anti-Bangladesh elements, anti-liberation forces came to power, and they stayed in power for 21 years. And their state-sponsored action was not only to make us forget what happened, because they were the collaborators, the ones that he was mentioning. It's a big and important, the collaborators are today creating all the havoc in our politics. So you should, as a Bangladeshi, know who they are. So after 75, and for 21 years, they were in power in some form or another, be it in a so-called as an elected person or as an army personnel, but their active role was to distort, not only erase the history, but to rewrite it in a distorted way. The ideals of 71, our Bengali nationality, you can go to America, you can become an American now, but you'll always be, your nationality will be Bangladeshi or Bengali, and your citizenship will be Bangladeshi. জাতীয়তা বোধের যে চেতনাটা, জাতীয়তা বোধ আর নাগরিকত্ব, they confused, not confused, they wanted you to forget your Bengali root. Then it was very easy, and also at the same time they distorted. The Bengalis were always religious, but they were, even if Hindus, Christian, Muslims or Hindus, they were religious, but never blind by religious faith. They were progressive, secular. They were they cohabited in Bengal for thousands of years. Buddhists, and there were smaller groups like Chakmas, Murongs. There were never any problems there. It's only after 75 that things like that started. And it was done intentionally to make you forget your roots and to give you a distorted sense of your religious roots. I mean, You can be Muslim, you can be Bengali, you can be human. There is no Bangabandhu. What did Bangabandhu say? I'm a human, I'm a Bengali, and I'm a Muslim. There is no conflict. If there is no conflict of a Chinese American Buddhist, why are we confused? And your job, yes, I understand why you're confused, because for 21 years our textbooks said a different history, and now you're hearing, and in the virtual world you're hearing something else. I ask you to read. Read. The more you read, the more it will be clear who Tajuddin was, who Sayyid Nazrul Islam was, who your leaders were, the betrayal of Mushtaq, and the betrayal of Zia. You will know them, but it is your duty to find that history out. Our duty is to pass it on to you. That's why I'm here. But your duty is to have to remove yourself from those implanted sense, like Pakistan. Pakistan is no nationality. Pakistan is a formed word. There's no race called Pakistanis. But there were for 1,000 years a race called Bengalis. So never forget your nationality. And of course, we are citizens of Bangladesh. So we are proud of that fact as well. And we may be Muslims, Hindus, Christians. I am very proud of my Muslim heritage. But there is no contradiction between it. If there is no contradiction of an Irish American Christian, Chinese American Christian, there should not be any confusion in your mind. And how will you find the history? There are so many books. Just go online and read. But online, there's this propaganda. So don't believe everything online. Read books. Read authentic historical books. Bangladesher Shadhinata Yuddher Dolil Patro, almost 12 books. There's so many books. Tale of Millions, A Legacy of Blood. Go and read it. Find your history out. Because if you don't know the truth, you will always be a confused person. Like a hyacinth, you will never be able to implant your roots like a banyan tree. So when again some sort of calamity comes, you will be swept away. You need to know your root and you need to know your history. There is no reason for confusion. Our slogan was Joy Bangla. Our leaders was Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Al-Badrs, like he said, were auxiliary forces. Jamaat are their direct descendants. Islami Chhatro Shibir is the direct, they changed name after 71 of Islami Chhatro Shena. They were collaborators of Pakistani armies. Do you know the cause of rape? Rape was a weapon of war. They wanted to change our nation, because we were so proud as a nation of Bengali. They said, the Pakistani generals said that we will change their nationality. We'll change the way they look by having the mixture of bloods. That's how bad they are. There's no way one can tell me there is the Muslim brotherhood and they are my brother. Not until they ask for forgiveness, not until they atone for their sins, not until they try their criminals, not until they give us. Do you know Islamabad was made from our money? Amader part. We were poor, but the income that we had, everything was drained there. Even after the cyclone, not a penny's worth of help came. So you must understand the suffering at the hand of these Pakistanis, of your people. And you must stand up for them. And you must stand against genocide of 71. You must fight, because you owe your blood to your predecessors. You have a free country to call Bangladesh and dream big and send satellites up there and build Padamshree by your own money, because my father died for you. Because Bangabandhu, you had a leader like Bangabandhu. You know why Balochistan is not free today? Because they don't have a Sheikh Mujib. They don't have a Bangabandhu.
Thank you, ma'am. So we are out of time now. Now, may I request Mr. Ajaat Jamwal, President, Jammu Kashmir Unity Foundation, a lawyer by profession, journalist, and a social activist.
Thank you, Gopalji. I thank all the panelists for giving an eye-opening presentation and supporting the cause of Jammu Kashmir Unity Foundation that we are propagating for so many years. And last year, we held this first program on International Genocide Day, Memorial Day. And it was basically the reason was that the Indian subcontinent, it has faced so many genocides in Bangladesh during partition in India and Pakistan, then in our neighborhood Balochistan. Even Afghanistan is a victim of Pakistan's terrorism. And Pakistan has become a genocidal nation. It is killing people, cutting across religions, regions, and you can say it has become the mother of terrorism. Anywhere you hear an incident of huge terrorism, that Pakistan is involved. Either it was 9/11, 26/11, or in Jammu and Kashmir for last 30 years. Pakistan has become a problem for not only India, but whole of the world. And this genocides and the continuing genocides in Indian subcontinent, that is our cause of concern. And it is our attempt to form an alliance, an international alliance, that fights for the prevention of genocides and replication of genocides. So it was our attempt. It has become a success due to all our panelists and especially Dr. Nuzhat. She has come all along from Bangladesh yesterday night, and today she is here with us. Early morning she will be leaving. Shri Bashir Assad, who has come from Kashmir today only, and Dr. Ajay Chrungoo, Sandhya Jain ji, because we are having some problem in booking this auditoriums, she came all the way from her home and got this auditorium booked. And she has written a beautiful book on Balochistan. You must all read it. And it was a pleasure that Sushil ji is with us, Mr. R.C. Ganju, Brigadier Dhimanzab, Advocate Vikram Jasrotia, and so many people have come from different parts of the state and even Delhi. So I like to thank you all for this nice evening. Thank you. Thank you very much.